Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
No! Bitcoin! Come on, little buddy! Bitcoin! I need you! Don't go!
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one place.
How about stretch preferred stock on Roxom? Receive 11.5% monthly cash dividends paid in Bitcoin.
11.5% paid in Bitcoin? How is that possible?
It's real. Stretch dividends on Roxom gives 11.5% monthly cash dividends paid in Bitcoin.
Dang! I want everyone pitching Roxom to your clients. Corporate traders, asset managers, old, young, Stretch on Roxom is for everyone.
Now that's a birthday gift. 11.5% in Bitcoin.
We are in heaven at 11.5. 11.5%. 11.5%.
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one place.
Oh, I forgot to mention, dividends on Roxom are paid in Bitcoin. Stretch your income, 11.5% paid in Bitcoin.
Stretch your income to 11.5, get 11.5 in Bitcoin and Roxom. 11.5%. 11.5%.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick, monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, then I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Welcome back to RoxomTV. My name is Walker America. I'm here with you every Tuesday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The price of Bitcoin is 76,891 infinitely printable Federal Reserve notes per Bitcoin, and we've got a great show ahead of us today. For the first part of the show, we are joined by the man, the myth, the legend, the voice of Bitcoin himself, the one and only Guy Swann, the guy who has read more about Bitcoin and read out loud more about Bitcoin than anyone you know. Guy, welcome to the show. Good to have you, man. Good to see you. Yes, I always love picking your brain, Guy, because you truly have read, and thereby people have listened to you read more about Bitcoin than anyone I know. It is truly mind-boggling at this point. How many reads? How many reads are you on now? What's the tally?
I'm about to hit I'm at near 1,400 episodes, and we're getting close to the 1,000 on the number of reads, and something in the 20 to 30 books narrated.
That is honestly just mind-blowing and incredible. Like having just done a couple of audiobooks, I know that is
it's a job. It's a
job. Like it's fun, it's cool, but man, it's a lot. It is a lot. So more power to you. I've got a bunch of stuff that I want to cover with you here today. One of the main things is just sort of a general reflection on the state of, let's say, the state of fiat, so to speak. And there's this one, I don't know if you saw this tweet Croesus, Jesse Myers put out. I'll just read the text of it real quick, just because it's kind of mind-blowing. It's pretty quick here. In the last year, the world has printed 9.3% more money. Global M2 money supply reached 141 trillion in 2026. When inflation starts to run hotter again, they will blame it on Iran and other proximate factors. But the root driver is the money printer. The money printer has been running hot for the last year. Where? China increased their money supply by 13.6% in the last 12 months. Their M2 is now 50 trillion, making it the largest global driver of fiat inflation. U.S. growth in M2 is just 4.6% over the last 12 months, making the U.S. comparatively responsible. But make no mistake, this means your dollars have been debased by almost 1/20th of their value in just a year. Since we live in a global economy, we're subject to an aggregate impact of global money printing. The U.S. has been accustomed to being the largest monetary base and therefore largely controlling global debasement, but China's money supply is now 2 times as large as the USA's. Your savings are being debased by Chinese monetary policy decisions, and you have no control. Nobody asked your permission. Nobody told you it was happening, but your savings just got diluted by 9.3% in 1 year. I mean, this is, I always love it. And he said he's also updating his 2025 global asset landscape as well. The very kind of famous chart now that, the likes of Michael Saylor and a bunch of folks have used. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I think this is such a good framing of this, because sometimes in the US, we do tend to think of we just think about the dollar sometimes, right? But there's a whole lot, there's a lot of dollars sloshing around. There's a lot of other fiat sloshing around too. And nobody is turning off the printer. I mean, how long does it take? Jesse can post these great stuff and these great analysis. You can read a 1,000 different, Bitcoin and inflation related, pieces out loud to people. We can go on podcasts ad nauseum, but what does it actually take for people to wake up and realize that they're being robbed every single year? What does it take? How do we get to there?
Time. Just time. If you look at monetary history, which is something I mean, anybody who's listening to the show knows I nerd out on quite a bit. Historically, like hard money standards, when you have, I guess you look previously to 200 years ago, 300 years ago, major monetary transitions usually took the better part of a century to really kind of cement themselves, because you have multiple generations that start to react to or relate to their money differently and relate to an outside money differently. Like the entire period of the African slave trade or transatlantic slave trade and everything, most people don't realize, but the real story of why that happened and why there was so much basically purchasing of slaves from the various kingdoms and countries and tiny little conflicting civilizations inside of Africa or along the African coast was largely because the British had better technology. The British, the Americas, the Spanish, like all of the dominant powers at the time were more technologically advanced, and they could actually create the monies along the African coast, which were largely the most prominent of which were the glass beads. And they could be created, essentially mass produced a completely non-scarce money to the British and to the powers that be at the time for something that was incredibly scarce along the African coast. So essentially, one society thought they had gold and they were trading under the apparent scarcity of gold, and the other side, had what's a Midas touch, right? They could just touch and turn anything into gold, and it cost them nothing. And this led to basically a gutting of their civilization. And it literally takes centuries to recover from that when you have that happen systematically. And it's the craziest thing is it's done without anybody's knowledge. It's not like everybody, like there's this big master plan by one set of countries to take over this other set of countries. It just naturally occurs when you aren't aware of the monetary dynamics. One's going to be taken advantage of, and the other is going to take advantage. And it's extremely simple economic incentives, and everybody can be completely ignorant of how it actually happens or the principles of why. Still happens exactly the same way. In fact, you can another interesting aspect about like where China and the U.S. and like the powers that be are is that largely during the 1800s, I think Chinese culture, it's actually referred to as it's like the age of embarrassment or something. I can't remember exactly what they refer to it as. But the Chinese civilization bet on silver being the dominant monetary standard, while the Western civilization betted on gold. That's why we live in a Western civilization today, is because they diverged, and China basically essentially got devalued at, orders of magnitude. The ratio used to be extremely close, and then it diverged just massively towards the mid to late 1800s, and China declined like huge in power and economic relevance. And they've basically been digging their way out intentionally. Like they've been thinking about it. Like they kind of know the position that they found themselves in, while we've been digging ourselves into a hole. But in some sense, everyone's taken on we've become the fiat everything world, largely because of our technology and because of how trade has moved into a sphere that has never had scarcity, where sound money could not be extended into without trust, which immediately reintroduces fiat. Fiat is, oh, just trust me, bro. And gold inside of a digital environment is just, I have the gold, trust me, bro. It's just one extra step, so looking at the timelines, I think the British pound went from, I want to say the shift to like 60 to 70% of the world used the British pound, to 60 to 70% of the world was using the US dollar or treasuries. US treasuries was, I think, about 30 to 40 years. It was really kind of like you started to see them trend toward each other after World War One. And then it wasn't really until the late 50s, early 60s that it really was just, it's the dollar and the British pound is yesterday's money. And I think we should expect it to be quicker today, purely because the internet exists. Like just thinking about what you're talking about, the shifting of a massive base network of the world. But we have so many new networks, like, network effects stack on top of network effects. But it is also insanely novel. And the thing that money sells, so to speak, or has to build up is trust. Trust in the money, aside from the institution or the entity that you are trying to do business with, or that is on the other side of the exchange. And what's funny is one thing that's happened very recently that I think is, I think probably some people think that like this is really bad for Bitcoin's position, or like it's cultural. Bitcoin needs to be politically nice or whatever, like this is bad branding. But that I actually think is a profound testament to Bitcoin's security and independence, and what Bitcoiners would probably refer to as extreme neutrality, radical neutrality, is the fact that Iran is accepting it for payment at the Strait of Hormuz, and now is selling like an insurance thing, which God knows whether it's a scam or whatever. Doesn't really matter. But the element is that Bitcoin, the thing to take away is that Bitcoin is being embraced by the U.S. and the U.S. financial system, and it is being embraced by Iran and the Iranian regime at the exact same time, and both of them know that they can use it without the other one threatening it. And that puts it in an insanely unique place in a world where there are no monies that work like that anywhere. And that is the base case. That's the reason money existed, is what can I use without having to trust the person that I'm trading with, to hold value. So looking at that, I personally put Bitcoin realistically on more of a 30-year timeline. At least one entire generation needs to grow up and become the dominant capital allocators and producers in the world, knowing that Bitcoin has always existed, and seeing that on any long timeline, everything just got more expensive over here and everything just got cheaper over here, whether it was fast at some point or it reversed for a year or two, or whatever, doesn't really matter. They'll just know that their granddad, their great granddad used to talk about how, I used to be able to buy stuff for a nickel that now costs $10. And then their dad's telling them about how, I used to buy stuff for 100,000 sats and now it's only 1,000 sats. And those stories will be cemented into the psychology of the society. And then Bitcoin will just be obvious. It won't even get credit for fixing the world. It will just become so clear that, like, I think history will probably just point to all the events, right? It's like this president and this country did this, and then these people bombed this, and then these people made peace, and it won't recognize that it was because they had to make peace because this country couldn't inflate this country anymore, that they were at an impasse and nobody could afford more bombs. Bitcoin won't get credit for it. It will just become in the background this thing that became. And the rest of the story of the world, and my reasoning for believing this is that all of monetary history actually explains all the wars. It explains all the conflicts. It explains why one country won and beat another country. But what do you hear about? The kings, the great battles, which princess stole away in the night to a different kingdom. You tell the drama, right? You tell this dramatic thing. It's like, but the real movers were gold. The real movers were this currency couldn't sustain its level of inflation or its level of fraud from its kingdom, as well as the competing kingdom could. And the real stories are gunpowder. The real stories are technological as to what shaped the world, while the political and dramatic stories that we tell about the people and the events, they're brilliant and they're fun, because they're human stories, but largely they are the consequential outcomes of built pressures from technological and monetary shifts. And they're just a fun way to relive what happened. Because it's hard to say, oh, well, money changed, and so all of the world shifted. The game of society shifted,
Well, I think it's such a great point, and perhaps one of the most fascinating things about Bitcoin and why it is such a, it was made for this moment, is because it is both a monetary and a technological shift within one thing, right? It has this, this duality where it's not just, hey, we got gunpowder over here, we got gold over here, we've got the printing press over here, and we got gold again over here. It's like no, we have it all in one entity, and that's I think the Hormuz story. Whether or not, again, because I'm a little bit skeptical on this too. Like let's see, like show me the transaction ID, right? Let's
verify
see
some.
Yeah, I want to see something.
Give me that timestamp. I want to see it.
But either way, like the narrative is out there, and I think you brought up a really great point, which is the juxtaposition of Iran doing this at the same time the U.S. over here is, you've got admirals that are saying, look, we're running a node, we're looking at the strategic importance of this, da 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 da. You've got the Secretary of War speaking favorably about it. You've got the administration overall speaking very favorably about Bitcoin from multiple angles, and really a lot of Jason Lowry's software thesis sort of like popping up in different places, and you're like, that's interesting. Wow, that's permeated quite a bit. Apparently, a few people got their hands on that. But again, this is just such a great example of Bitcoin being money for enemies, right? The whole power of Bitcoin being that it cannot discriminate, it cannot discern who you are. It doesn't care. It has no means or need by which to care. Bitcoin just is. And through that, it's able to provide the same value to friends as to enemies. Like, it doesn't matter if you don't like this person, they can still use Bitcoin. Like, it doesn't matter if you're North Korea or Iran or China or the US or anyone. You can, or you or me or a corporation, you can use Bitcoin just the same. And there's that monetary side of it, which is the protection from the uncertainty of fiat mismanagement, or should I say the certainty of fiat mismanagement, because we know they got to keep debasing, right? We know they got to keep printing. We know they got to keep lying about how bad it really is. But then there's also the technological side of, you cannot stop this thing. You cannot stop somebody from sending a Bitcoin transaction. That duality there, that is so powerful. And it really is just kind of like, it's wild to watch this play out. It's wild, Guy, to watch. And you've been in Bitcoin, longer than I have. So you've got even a better kind of long-term view on this. But I mean, is it a little bit surreal to you, having, been in Bitcoin, been actively in Bitcoin, you've been educating in Bitcoin for so long, you now see these sorts of things happening in the real world that Bitcoiners were just sort of hypothesizing about, like, well, yeah, they could just, if they're sanctioned, they can just use Bitcoin. And, hey, boy, the US government will probably start looking at this for X, Y, and Z. Like, is that surreal to you? Or is it kind of just like, yeah, about time?
Most of the time, no. Because I don't really think about it until I have to stop and think about it. And then kind of like looking back on the perspective that I had. Like, I remember like this really epic moment on the show The Good Wife, about the lawyer and was it Jake Gyllenhaal?
Oh no, it's the guy from American Pie. I'm forgetting his last name.
What's his name?
Freaking. But the guy from American Pie.
Somebody's perplexing it right now. Yeah. But he was on the show, and I remember, like, it was such a huge moment, because Bitcoin felt like this little place on the internet that didn't exist in the real world, in the kind of establishment spaces. And this was the first traditional thing. This is the first, like, on TV moment. And I remember being like, all the conversations, because I guess that was like 2013 or something, and I'd been in for 2 years at that point. And so many conversations about, like, this is going to be real one day, this, like, people are going to be aware of this, and it's going to, like, enter the psyche, and this will be pivotal in a presidential election at some point, which we were there. We did that one. And this will be a hot button issue. This will be contentious. There will be fights against it. What was the choke point 2.0? There's so many different things that were just discussed about, like, what happens as this gets bigger. And then one of the things that I remember having an explicit conversation about was, there will be two major powers that likely will be on two ends of Bitcoin adoption, and one of them will utilize it to get around the influence or the power, the controls of the larger country. And as maybe as small or as like tiny of an edge case as it is, this is exactly what Iran is doing. And it's only like kind of in stopping to reflect that like, holy God, all this stuff happened, you know, and it's only going to continue to happen bigger to the point that it's not news anymore that it's happening. It's just the way it will continue to unfold, especially as one entity or one group is able to do it successfully. And I think a perfect example is, kind of mentioning it back to the good life. I just remember this like moment of like surreal. It's probably the most surreal it ever felt. Was to just sit there and like watch that and be like an actor that I know in a show that like my parents saw that was just on like mainstream TV. And then and it wasn't even just that like that was surreal to hear about it on normal TV. It was just this moment of like, this is going to be real one day, you know, like all this stuff that it felt like BS, like a little piece of it felt like, yeah, Bitcoin's going to be this huge thing that's so important. You know, like there's this part of you that like it has to be like, and you play your Austrian economic theories back in your head, and you're like, no, this has got to work. But then there's another part that's like, I'm this weird nerd on this corner of the internet talking to a bunch of lunatics who think that, you know, we're gonna make a money that that the United States government can't do anything about it, and there's quite a bit of pie in the sky, like you guys are just retarded going on, and there's this little voice in the back of your head is like, you have no idea what you're talking about, you know. That's never really going to happen. But I think that episode just made me realize that what we were talking about wasn't just theory, you know, like there was a very serious chance that it was going to happen one day. And then there are those moments, but most of the time, 90% of the time, 99% of the time, it's just like, okay, well, yeah, this is the next thing that happened. This is the next thing that, you know, creeps up on you, right? You're boiling frog. But then you stop to think, it's like, man, this water used to be cold. You know, like there used to be nothing in this water. And it's a bit crazy to think about that. It feels inevitable in hindsight. It's like, well, yeah, duh. Especially when you think about, my brother's wife is Iranian, and we've had so many problems. Like we can't even they shut down the phones. We can't even talk to her family. And I've talked to and worked with people in Iran or whatever, just because we get hanging out with people in their family or whatever, trying to stay in touch through friends of friends who know how to get VPNs and that sort of stuff. But I'll tell you, I've chatted with them about how they see Bitcoin and how they think about things, and try to get a package into Iran. Can't do it. Try to get dollars into Iran. Not a chance in hell. Get Bitcoin into Iran. You don't do anything different. You don't do any, it's not even a thing that you have to do. Like, it just works. And there's nothing Iran can do about it, which is probably why they're being very serious about it from the Strait of Hormuz position is, well, if we can't do anything about it, the U.S. government ain't going to do anything about it. You know, what do you do? What do you do? Like, for crying out loud, one of the guys that I know that I talked about uses freaking Cake Wallet. I use Cake Wallet. He's just like, yeah. And he's like, if we have the internet, I just go look at my address, you know, I just go look at my balance. And I asked, I was like, you know, what's the general thinking over there? And like, he's in a Persian community or whatever. And he's like, well, in regards to Bitcoin specifically, and he says, well, you know, it's not that like Bitcoin holds some like super special place or anything, or they're super like, oh yeah, Bitcoin and crypto is so important or anything. It's more just that like our currency is so horrible. It's like such garbage. Like they lost like 90% over a period of 12 months or something. I mean, just terrible, that they will do anything they can to operate in a different currency. And there are basically just a few standards that have developed where they can get dollars. They work in dollars. Dollars are still the king. But it says, and nobody, there are very few like, oh, Bitcoin is the one and the only one, but it is widely recognized as a reliable option. As a reliable option, is that like, oh no, yeah, we can use Bitcoin just as easily as we can do this other thing. You know, if you're a little bit tech savvy, if you ask someone who hasn't even accepted Bitcoin before, they're probably going to be like, oh yeah, sure. Like just the idea of something that they kind of know they can actually use. It becomes a real option for them. And it's just kind of seen as, well, at least it's just going to work. And I really think that's the path to a Bitcoin standard. It's not we've got super devotees and we've explained Austrian economics to people, and you know, someone has to be convinced that sound money is better than fiat money. Nah, it's just going to be the thing that kept working when everything else stopped.
I think I agree with that position, because again, you look at the state of, let's say, adoption in the Western world right now, and the vast overwhelming majority of it is from a store of value perspective, which is fine and great, and like that's part of that journey, right, for Bitcoin. You look at other parts of the world, and yeah, maybe a store of value as well. They may actually look to dollars or Tether or something as a store of value also, because again, compared to their currency, it's the gold standard, no pun intended. But they also actively use it as a medium of exchange because they need to use it, because they don't have bank accounts, or they have very, very tight capital controls. They can't move money in and out, as you mentioned. Like Iran as a great example of that. Like can't move dollars in or out. Like can't move a package in or out. Can move Bitcoin just the same as you do it anywhere else, right? Just send it to an address. And I think that necessity driving adoption is really just, I mean, that's like the most powerful thing Bitcoin has going for it, right? And it's necessities driving adoption in different ways. One could argue the necessity of trying to escape the debasement of your currency even in Western nations drives Bitcoin adoption from the store value perspective. The necessity of being able to send money and actually use money without insane capital controls, and use money that's not being devalued overnight or over the space of a year by 99%. Like that's also necessity. Like it's a spectrum of necessity, right? But ultimately it's like, that's kind of where that, you get Bitcoin at the price you deserve. It's like, because you tend to only get Bitcoin once you really have a need for it. Some people, we're far out ahead of this, people like yourself, far out ahead of it. But that group of people that were way out ahead of this thing is vanishingly small compared to the total number of people who have adopted Bitcoin since then and who will adopt Bitcoin. Like, those were the true pioneers, right? Using it before anybody else even heard of it. Now, most people, I mean, maybe not most people, a lot of people have heard of it, right? The Overton window has shifted drastically to where it's no longer.
I actually think there was a study that it is absolutely most people. Like it is. Bitcoin is a household name, whether or not anybody has touched it or knows anything about it, but it firmly exists in the mind space, like in the mind virus of the world, right? Bitcoin is there, and we're firmly in the era of people are going to touch it again or hear about it again in 2 to 3 years, and they're going to go, that thing's still here, and it's just going to keep doing that until just like the internet, like you just get to a point where a whole generation grows up, or like nobody thinks the internet's not going to be here in 10 years. Who would possibly say that? Right. Like, no, of course, the internet is how all communication, everything, the internet's going to be bigger in 10 years, way bigger and way more integrated into everything that we do. But anyway, yeah.
By the way, our producer did let me know it was Jason Biggs.
Jason
Biggs.
God.
And the episode actually came out in 2012 and it was called Bitcoin for Dummies.
2012?
Isn't that
really
wild? I mean, the fact that they were that far ahead of it.
I would have told you it was the end of 2013. Wow. Okay. I was off on my timeline.
I mean, it's shocking
totally
though that
expected that.
it's shocking though that was that early. And I remember, we've all seen that clip where Jason Biggs is like, it's the future. And it's like, what an incredibly prophetic, for kind of mainstream television. Like they were really.
No, I loved the line.
Cutting edge.
I loved the line. It was really good when she was like, I bought my first Bitcoin for the first time, and it went into my wallet or whatever, and it didn't feel real. And he said, "Huh, real's gonna change." Like that was the line or whatever. And I was like, oh, that's a good line.
Yeah.
Wait, good delivery, Biggs. You got it. You got it. Get on that elevator and get out of there. Let that moment ride. And that's an epic line when Bitcoin's never existed in that whole sphere before. Like think about that in 2012. Think about that in 2012. What that felt like. That was a moment. That was a real moment.
It is pretty nuts. And just speaking of things that are real or aren't real, one of the other things I wanted to talk to you about was sort of the lack of reality in the fiat system. I don't know if you saw this, but incoming Fed Chair Kevin Warsh, he's basically said he wants to change the primary inflation gauge to move from core PCE, which is currently sitting at 3.2%, which excludes food and energy. LOL. That's okay. Just get rid of the food and energy. But he wants to change it to trimmed mean PCE, which is sitting at 2.36, a lot closer to the arbitrary 2% inflation target. And that measure excludes any extreme monthly price swings. So, but hey, it gets you closer to that 2%. And I think it's worth talking about this a little bit because we exist in this system where, again, fiat is our water, right? And we're the fish. Like it is just, we don't know what the water is, but it's always there. But all of the framing from, and this is not specific to Warsh, right? This is, and I think that Warsh is really just trying to set himself up to be able to cut rates and do some balance sheet expansion, like by saying, hey, look, see, and under our new our new gauge, inflation's right where it should be. So we're good. Don't worry about it. But this, when they speak in these passive tones, and people always, the cost of living, it's so passive to talk about that way, as though it happens by magic. They set this 2% inflation target, but then they change the gauge by which they measure price inflation, or they change, they change the basket of goods that is considered for it. Well, we're not counting steak anymore because people aren't buying steak, so we'll use ground beef. Well, why aren't they buying steak? Is it because it got too expensive? And then this idea that the 2% inflation has absolutely no basis in any sort of economic reality. It was, for those that don't know, it was basically said in an offhand comment by like the Minister of Finance in New Zealand back in the 90s when they were undergoing like 10% inflation. And somebody asked him, like, well, what should the target be? He's like, I don't know, like 1 or 2% maybe.
2% sounds good.
Sounds good. And then basically
the gospel of 2% was born.
And then every other central bank ran with it. It wasn't actually until, I looked this up today just to confirm, it wasn't until 2012 that the U.S. officially adopted 2% inflation as their long-term inflation target. That was under Bernanke. Mm-hmm. But Guy, it's this idea that we know they're lying. They know they're lying. They know that we know that they're lying. Like we all know that everybody's lying, that this is all made up. But apparently not. Apparently not enough people do know this. And apparently enough people still fall for it's the greedy corporations or inflation's Trump's fault or inflation's Biden's fault or just name, whatever opposing party is, throw it in there. And it's just, again, it's one of those things that this gets back to what we were talking about originally, where it's like, what does it take for people to wake up? Well, probably just time. But my God, it just really seems like they're trying to set up right now, like changing the inflation numbers, or changing the gauge, trying to get closer to 2%. Like, look, we're good. I mean, or I guess a better question is, do you subscribe more to the Larry Lepard big print thesis or more of the Lynn Alden gradual print thesis? Where are you at with this? And I mean, do you think that this is really Warsh just trying to, basically do what Trump put him in there for, which is, hey, let's juice the wheel, grease the wheels a little bit. Let's juice the system. Let's get things pumping before midterms because it's all about the midterms. Like, what's your read on all this?
I would say it's the incentives and the economic reality are aligned such that there is no way for it to not keep going like that. How do we fudge the numbers better? I've talked about this on the show quite a bit, and I had a video about the debt. There's one extremely reliable metric. It doesn't matter who's in office. It doesn't matter what time period you're looking at. It doesn't matter what war we went to or didn't or got out of. Every 10 years, the U.S. debt doubles. It just doubles. So, And because of that, you know, 8 or so years ago, I was like, well, in 2025, they'll probably be about $35 trillion, $36 trillion. And that was when, you know, in 2015, it was 17. It was 16, 17 trillion. And then in 2005, it was like 8. And in 1995, it was like 3.5. Like this, it's like clockwork all the way back to the 60s. The only exception to it was between 70s and 80s. And during that period, it tripled. So it never broke trend to the downside. It only broke it to the upside. And that means that in 2035, whether Trump was elected, it doesn't matter. It's just pure, what can the system actually sustain without collapsing? Because that's the thing, is that if you stop it, it does collapse. We have multiple industries that cannot survive the way they are built. Like I'm talking about retooling, rebehavioring, re-standardizing everything. Like the momentum, the inertia, the sheer vast inertia of the way we have built things over a period of 50 years, tied into how our monetary system works, means that you think AI is disruptive? You think AI is going to lose jobs? Sound money is going to be way worse. Sound money is going to be way worse because we live and die by the fact that we have defrauded the system through easy money, and all of our industries live, their percents, their literal profitability is based on the lie about the money and where they are in the hierarchy of receiving it. And if their place is lost, if there is no more hierarchy, a gap for those who get money quickly and those who get it slowly, if that price difference, it's all arbitrage. Our financial system arbitrages, our medical industry arbitrages, our the banking architecture arbitrages. All large corporations, the stock market, the S&P, all of our indexes, they arbitrage. Everything arbitrages. There's a reason why every major company that produces a thing, Apple, Google, Nvidia, give it some time. What do they all end up doing? They have a credit card. You have an Apple credit card. You have a Costco credit card. You have everybody is in the market for debt, because what's the easiest thing to do when you get debt at impossibly low rates? Rent it back out at a higher rate. And actually, I recently talked about this on a Guy's Take episode of the show called Free Rent for the Rich. Like, what does it actually mean? Because I think a lot of people are so focused on like, oh, well, you print money, you get 2% inflation or whatever. You get malinvestment, right? Something that would otherwise lose 2% suddenly looks like a positive investment. It's like, true. You get malinvestment, you get reckless behavior. But I think there's still even something missing from that framing and understanding exactly what's happening. And if you break it down to just like two people in an economy, like let's say you have somebody who has a house, like let's say Nancy has a house and Bob has X amount of money, and he wants to buy the house, but Nancy doesn't want to, right? She wants to get a stable return because otherwise she wants to live in that house. It's her house. She's built in, like, she's earned the value of that house. She's not going to give it up for nothing. And so, and this is the whole economy, right? This only the house. It's only Nancy and it's only Bob. And so she needs Bob to be able to provide her with enough value to give up her house. And Bob offers 5%. I'll pay you 5% a year in the house's value in rent, $1,000 a month, whatever it is. And she's like, no, that's not enough for me to take the time to build or get another house built or whatever it is. I want 12%. Well, that would, in the exact same vein, be the price of debt, the interest rate on debt. Because that's the only capital we have, is that if you want to loan, if you want to borrow out that much capital, we're talking about using up those resources, which means that without a 12% interest rate, you're not going to be able to buy anything in that economy. Like, she's not going to loan it out at 12%. Like, that's her rent. She's not going to loan it out at anything less than 12%. So that's the interest rate. The person who owns the capital sets the interest rate. Now introduce a third party, a bank. What does the bank get to do? The bank gets to print money out of thin air, and they get to set the interest rates. Why? Because they don't have to borrow it from Nancy. They don't have to borrow the actual capital. Now, if it was her savings, they would. They would have to owe the savings back, and thus they would have to pay a fair interest rate in order to offer a slightly higher interest rate to Bob. And Bob would have to be good for it. But if they can print money out of thin air, Bob can just get whatever loan he needs at 1%. I mean, ZERP, we've been in the zero interest rate, like psychosis or phenomenon, whatever you want to call the P. And psychosis feels like the right word, era for 10 years. And what do? They literally rented money to people for 0%, to giant corporations for 0%, 1%, 2%, like to the trillions of dollars. What does that amount to? What are they going to do? Are they going to work really, really hard and do really, really difficult and really, really risky business practices to see if they can get 20% back? Hell no. They're going to be like, well, what do we do to make 3%? Because that's 2% profit. And 3% is easy. Hell, inflation's 4%. 3% will get by default. We don't even have to do any work. What we can actually do is we can buy up all the real estate in society and just rent it back to the people we bought it from for a profit. We don't have to do shit. We have the easiest scam in history. Own everything at basically free rental. Because go back to the Nancy and Bob or the Alice and Bob, whatever the hell I used, don't even remember.
Either way.
The example is that she wants 12%, right? But what if Bob now takes out the loan and he just jacks up the price 12%? He just offers 12% more. Boom. She thinks she got a deal. She thinks she got the quote that she wanted. And so she sells the house for 12% over the original price. But now what does she have to buy? What does she have to get? Nothing. Bob just owns the house. And is he going to take less than 12%? Did she actually get 12% more of a house by doing that? No, because Bob never built a house. You'd only ever actually genuinely be able to offer that price if you had made capital into existence. But he borrowed it, which means that he borrowed her capital, the capital that she created in the world, in order to buy her capital from her at a rate that she explicitly refused to offer it because he simply got a loan out of thin air at 1%, 2%. And now what's going to happen? She's going to rent back from Bob. She's going to have to rent a home. She's going to have to rent a room out of her own damn house for now, 9%, 8%? And the government of this little world is going to be like, look, her cost of living dropped. You know, it used to require 12% to rent. Now it's only 9%. She's renting the capital that she already created. And she's paying it explicitly to Bob. Bob is now earning the income that she was owed on what she made in the world. This is exactly how all of the giant corporations own every damn thing. And then the cost of living we used to calculate the cost of living with how much it costs to own a home. Now we calculate the cost of living with how much it costs to mortgage a home, which is just rent. It's just rent from the bank. Nobody would lend any real capital to anyone at 0%, 1%, 2%. That doesn't exist anywhere in the world. Give somebody your $3,000 lawnmower for $5 a month. And to the point that you can't mow your lawn. That lawnmower loses $1,500 worth of value by the end of the first 6 months. And you got what? $30 for it. That's not feasible. But if you can get a loan at 1% and go buy a lawnmower, You've done the exact same thing. You've stolen a lawnmower from somebody and offering them $5 a month. And then what do? You rent it back to a landscaping company that now doesn't want to have to pay it used to be $2,500 for a lawnmower. Now it's $3,000 for a lawnmower. So you have to rent the damn thing from BlackRock because BlackRock just bought up all the fucking lawnmowers and rented it back to us for nothing. We rented it to them for free and they sold it back to us. Like, the whole thing is such a blatant. The reason BlackRock owns every piece of real estate in this country is just because of the financing scam. And we all rent it from them. The houses that we built, we rent from a company that just gets free capital from a money printing machine. They own everything. We will own nothing and we will be happy. I'm not happy about it. I'm not happy about it. They were wrong about that part. We do own nothing, but I'm pretty pissed about it. I really feel like the whole thing just needs to die, but it's not going to. They're just going to keep printing because they don't have a choice. Understand the entire business model. Like BlackRock has built an empire on a thing that is actually a net loss to the economy. It only looks like a gain on paper because they judge by the interest rate and the rent. If they actually had to pay the 12% to the original homeowner, none of it would ever have existed. And the second it goes up to a real price, to 12%, their whole business model is like, well, crap, what do we do now? We can't do anything. And even worse is that when it goes up to 12%, not only can they not rent, not only can they not continue to own everything and then rent it at a price that they can actually make a profit at, because they can only make a profit because of fake interest rate. Not only does that go out the window, but since nobody else can, the price of houses come down to an actually legitimate price, and all of the capital they already have plummets in value. Like, it's literally life or death. They either print, or BlackRock, JP Morgan, all of the major financial institutions, all of the banks, all of our healthcare institutions, all of it goes out of business. Or they have to restructure in such a profoundly massive way that it will make the disruption from AI look like a cakewalk, because at least the disruption of AI is productive. This would be a total restructuring of an unprofitable system of economic behavior that has been so ingrained that people have lived their entire lives thinking it couldn't possibly be destructive. There's no way. I was born and this was the way things worked. But it is destructive. Our one caveat, our one benefit was that we got to export the theft to everybody on planet Earth. So we only felt about 5% of the damage that we were doing. China took 5%. The Middle East took another 20%. Europe took 7%. Like, we were exporting the cost of our living, but people stopped buying our treasuries. People are slowly, they're closing in. They're putting up their walls. They're being defensive because everybody's realizing that we're all paying for a giant debt, a giant bill that nobody can actually afford. And in 2035, it's going to be $70 to $80 trillion. And in 2045, it's going to be $160 to $200 trillion. And the price of a coffee is going to be $42. And then you're going to add $5 for oat milk. And it's
Don't drink oat milk, though.
Don't get oat milk. And the world is slowly waking up to that. And because of that, they're closing in. We're going to have way more conflicts because sustainable and fair trade is what avoids conflicts, and we're losing that because we don't have a sound money. We don't have a fair money to actually trade in, and so everybody becomes isolationist. Everybody becomes like, how do we control those resources? Who's going to be the ones with the guns standing outside of TSMC? Where is Taiwan, independent and friendly to the U.S.? Are they owned by China? Like, everybody's like, okay, they're taking tally. They're taking tally of what they can put guns around before the bill comes due. And they're going to print as long as they can to see how little they can pay of it and how much they can force somebody else to foot the bill. But yeah, it'll be a big, slow, painful, mushy mess.
The interesting thing too, and I want to be conscious of your time here, guy. Maybe just one other thing is, a lot of time, and I've been guilty of this too, right? Trashing the U.S. dollar. Like, oh, the hyperinflation's coming, da da da. But
it's the best of a pile of garbage.
Well, yeah, I think what Greg Foss once said to me, it's the prettiest horse at the glue factory. I've taken that. It's the skinniest kid at fat camp, right?
Yeah.
Take whatever analogy you want for this, but yeah, the dollar's the worst, except for all
King
the rest.
shitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. And so, sometimes I when I hear people talk about, hyperinflation's coming for the dollar, it's like, okay, not disagreeing. But
well,
if
where's
that's
the pressure
case,
coming from?
Yeah, and if that's the case, that means probably almost every other fiat currency is already hyperinflated. Is that a fair statement? And maybe has already hyperinflated, failed, been replaced by something else, failed again? Like that's the thing. We can. It's difficult to figure out the timescales, right?
I had that position as well. The dollar has to hyperinflate, but the more I learned and kind of thought about like liquidity and networks and how hyperinflation is an emotional event. It's a psychological event. It's a total and complete loss of trust, and backed up by such thin liquidity or such a divergence between the liquidity and the amount of the currency that when it breaks, it just runs. It runs and there's no stopping it. And the idea is to how can we drop this as fast as humanly possible so that I have toilet paper that is still worth something tomorrow morning. So the more I really thought about, the more I realized that the dollar can't hyperinflate until there is something bigger, or until there is something with a large enough, it's like pressure in pipes, right? Or water in a series of buckets. You have to be able to transfer the water to somewhere else. You have to be able to release the pressure into another entity. Like this is exactly why you can, you can't escape the banking system. This is why the banking system itself almost, it's so easy to actually prevent it by printing a lot of money, prevent it from collapsing, because there's no such, you can't bank run from the banking system. There's no way to pull, in 24 hours, how do you pull $3 trillion out of US banks? Not possible. Literally, there is not a door big enough to actually do that and soak up that amount of value. You move it within. You can collapse a big bank, but you only do it by transferring your balance to a different big bank. And so you're stuck in the system. And because of that, the dollar will have to specifically be outmanned by a different currency. It will have to devalue faster than the yuan for a period to the point that people are scared of the dollar's future. And then it can hyperinflate, and very possibly faster than many currencies could, because it's got such a big bill, and it's when it's realized that it's no longer king shitcoin. The exit might be legendary. But that's not going to happen with the Chinese yuan, because the Chinese yuan isn't nearly big enough, and they're doing the same thing but worse than we are, which makes me think that hyperinflation of any fiat literally only happens when, or of the fiat system can only happen when Bitcoin's big enough to actually soak it up. When there's enough liquidity in the Bitcoin world to genuinely exit, to sell out of the currency, to sell out of the system entirely, and hold a different standard, hold a different unit, a competing unit, one that will fluctuate based on the value of the dollar. Because of that, this is why the store value phase of Bitcoin will likely last a lot longer than people think, is because you need $4 trillion worth of liquidity into and out of Bitcoin in a day to actually have something where the pressure can release fast enough that the bottom can actually open, that there's actually a potential there. But because of that, the entire structure of the system will have to be tethered to Bitcoin. There will have to be something. It will never actually let go until there are enough interested parties with a large enough stake in Bitcoin that there are going to be people who are going to make incredible amounts of money off of that shift for them to let the doors open wide enough for that amount of pressure to be released. In other words, there need to be enough stakeholders that that a civil war doesn't happen. Like right now, if somehow we were in a position where like this could happen at this very moment, they would just kill all the Bitcoiners. Like they would just put us in prison, take everything that we have, and they would be like, "You caused all of this," and because there was too many people who would just be decimated. Like decimated. Everyone would lose their jobs. Everyone, the banking system, like it would be a disaster. It would be the end of the American empire. We would go from the most important country in the world to just a pile of manure. Like the poor and the middle class would just all become the super poor. Like it would just be utter chaos, and they would be desperate to cut somebody's throats, and desperate to figure out who did this, and it would be Bitcoiners. But the thing is it can't happen because Bitcoin's not big enough. So thank God. But I think, as it grows, people will be saved by the slow trickle into, I should have a little bit of a hedge in Bitcoin. I should have a little bit of exposure, the network, the tools, as long as the US remains most free to be able to just create something and let people use it. We will innovate our ways into new tools and new experiences and hedges in retirements and all of that stuff, that there's exposure to Bitcoin such that, when the stock market index collapses, enough people's retirement actually just stays about even or ticks up a little bit, because while one side plummeted, the other side went up. Their Bitcoin exposure went up while their stock market exposure went down, and they'd be like, man, glad my hedge fund company switched to half stock market, half Bitcoin, because like, whoa, look at the news over there. Those corporations are effed in the A. And I think that's when you actually have the capacity to do it. And the last people on the boat will be the ones, sitting in the water begging for a life raft. And everybody will be like, man, we've been telling you about this boat for freaking 20 years, man. You guys took your damn time, but here's a rope.
Yeah. We all get it at the price we deserve, right? And that luckily there's plenty of room for everyone. It's just that the room happens to be completely finite, and you're going to get a shrinking piece of it the longer you wait. But hey, there's still room for you, right? There's room for all types. But Guy, I appreciate you coming on here today. This was great catching up with you, picking your brain as always. For folks who somehow have not heard the voice of Bitcoin before, where can people find you? Where can they listen to the pod? Send them anywhere you want.
Okay. Yeah. So check out Bitcoin Audible. You can just find me Guy Swann, SWANN, on pretty much any platform these days. I've got some fun stuff I'm gonna be doing with YouTube. I've never paid any attention to YouTube really, but I'm trying to be a little bit more like, okay, I need to really like think about my content and how I'm doing it, because I've been slowly working back towards video and film stuff. I went to film school. So check out all of that stuff. And then also we have been working on a development project and another business for about 2.5, almost 3 years. And I finally have the first pieces of this that I'm sharing out and is public. You can check out Pear Drop. That's pear like the fruit. Pear Drop. Pear Drop Desktop specifically. We're still waiting on App Store stuff. But we're taking a heck of a bet, and I think a very unique take on how to make peer-to-peer not suck, and to how to deplatform in a way that actually provides a better and more fun experience, rather than dealing with something that feels like you're having to give up. Something that used to be easy to make it complicated or have weird keys or whatever. And Pairdrop is kind of our first base case. It's like, look, you're going to be able to just share files with anybody very easily, very simply, scan a QR, and that's it. And so we're just kind of proving that case as we build out the rest of our software stack. But there's a lot coming there, and that is at pairdrive.com, because that's the direction that we're headed right now. So pairdrive.com if you want to check that out, and you can kind of see the tools that we're playing around with. But yeah, that's that's all my stuff that I'm wrapped up in right now. Follow me on socials, and I'll keep you updated. Got some fun stuff in the next, probably within 2 weeks. 2 weeks TM.
Yeah, 2 weeks to slow the spread. No, I love it. I know you've been working on this kind of covert stuff for a while, so really excited to dig into that. I was not aware that you guys had gone live with that, so super excited to check that out.
Drop. It's still, you could still call it alpha, beta,
Okay.
you know, whatever. It's like super early, but at least the like I've been using the desktop and the Android APK for long enough that it's just like, well, it just works. Like I want to change the interface, I want to clean some stuff up, but it works.
Sure.
It does the job. And so at the Time Chain Summit a couple days ago in Colorado, I was like, you know what? Let's just make it public. Let's just share it out there, because we've really hit a baseline, like where the tooling that we have, I think, is going to move way faster because we've kind of solved most of the primitives, and now we're building on top of the tool. So we've been spending a long time building essentially a stack to make all of the things we want possible, and now all of the major pieces are there, and now we're building on top of it, and it just feels like it's moving a lot faster now. So it's like, okay, let's share it out. Let's share our first app, then we'll share the engine here in the next week or two, and then we're getting hard on like the real the base app experience that I think is going to be unique and that you've never really been able to do with files before. And then I get to show people what you can build with it and on top of it. So that's where we are. It feels like time to start telling people about it.
I love it. Pairdrive.com. Go check it out. Go give Guy a follow, subscribe to his podcast as well. He's hitting over 1,000 reads. Just wild. Guy, thank you for coming on here. Thank you for sharing your scarce time here on RoxomTV. Great chatting with you. And guys, we will be taking a quick break here, but when we come back on Roxom, we welcoming Matthew Kratter to the stage. So stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back here on RoxomTV in just a moment.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
No! Bitcoin! Come on, little buddy! Bitcoin! I need you! Don't go!
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one place.
How about stretch preferred stock on Roxom? Receive 11.5% monthly cash dividends paid in Bitcoin.
11.5% paid in Bitcoin? How is that possible?
It's real. Stretch dividends on Roxom gives 11.5% monthly cash dividends paid in Bitcoin.
Dang! I want everyone pitching Roxom to your clients. Corporate traders, asset managers, old, young, Stretch on Roxom is for everyone.
Now that's a birthday gift. 11.5% in Bitcoin.
11.5. We are in heaven at 11.5. 11.5%. 11.5%.
Welcome back to RoxomTV. The price of Bitcoin is 76,848 infinitely printable Federal Reserve notes per coin. We're about to get started here with Matthew Kratter from Bitcoin University, but before we do that, Iran has reportedly launched Hormuz Safe, a new Bitcoin-enabled maritime insurance and transit platform tied to shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. According to Bloomberg and Iran International, the initiative is connected to Iranian authorities and entities linked to the newly created Persian Gulf Strait Authority, which was established after recent security escalations around the waterway. Just weeks ago, Tether froze roughly $344 million in USDT in coordination with OFAC and U.S. law enforcement. Blockchain analytics firms linked wallets to Iranian-linked entities, including addresses associated with the Central Bank of Iran. That is the difference between Bitcoin and stablecoins. Stablecoins can be frozen by issuers. Bitcoin cannot because it is an asset without an issuer. The platform allows maritime insurance and transit-related payments to be settled in Bitcoin, giving Iran a sanctions-resistant payment rail around one of the world's most important energy choke points. Before the final rollout, Reuters reported the Greek maritime risk firm Maersk warned ships about suspicious actors demanding Bitcoin payments for safe passage through Hormuz while impersonating Iranian authorities. Multiple vessels were later attacked during regional tensions. The Strait of Hormuz handles roughly 20% of global oil and liquefied natural gas flows. Iran is now allegedly attempting to formalize a Bitcoin-based payment and insurance framework around that choke point, routing around the exact enforcement mechanism that just froze hundreds of millions in stablecoins tied to Iranian-linked entities. For Bitcoin, this is another real-world example of why neutral money matters and a great reminder that Bitcoin is money for enemies. I'd love to bring in Matt Kratter now, founder of Bitcoin University. Matt, good to have you here on RoxomTV. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, Walker.
Good to have you here. And this story is really fascinating to me because I think against this backdrop, you've also got the United States, who at the same time, Trump administration has obviously been much more friendly towards Bitcoin versus the prior administration. But you've also got, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, talking about this. You've got admirals in the Navy talking about the fact that, look, we're running a node. We are looking at this for its strategic implications. You've got people all through the government basically saying little snippets of Jason Lowery's soft war thesis. And it's all a bit surreal. But I mean, what's your read on this? First of all, do you think this is legit? Because I'm slightly skeptical about any of these stories coming out. I know it's been reported on very widely, but what's your read on, okay, is this one legit, or is this just kind of another, a bit of news, but maybe it won't actually materialize into actual action?
It's a good question. It looks real to me, but that being said, it's always, we're definitely in the post-truth age where anything on the internet can be manufactured and can be part of information warfare from either side or from another side. But if it's true, as you said, it's certainly the Bitcoin adoption story of the year, maybe of the last 5 years as well. And I think it's especially interesting given the context that it is tied to the global commodity trade and crude oil in particular, given the history of the petrodollar and how important that has been for U.S. hegemony. And to the extent you can get global trade using Bitcoin, it's definitely a big deal.
It is very, I think I'm glad you brought up the petrodollar side of this, because that is kind of like this has been the status quo for so long, right? Now the status quo has been shifting, I think, for other reasons. You know, Bitcoin isn't the only factor here. You've got the whole BRICS block. You know, there was talk that they were going to issue a gold-backed currency, but regardless, you know, China has quite a large currency base. Other countries in there as well that are, you know, net producers have very large currency bases as well. You've seen oil deals settled in other currencies. It's not just the dollar anymore. We're not the only game in town. But does this, I mean, do you think, is this a bit of a water, if this turns out to be true, we're prefacing this with a little skepticism. If this turns out to be true, do you think this is a bit of a watershed moment where it kind of becomes very abundantly clear, oh, hey, we can just use this and the US government can't tell us no? I mean, that's really the power here, right? Is, look, no, Bitcoin, you can't turn anyone off from it, right? You can't, Bitcoin doesn't care if you're Iran or the US government or you or me or Michael Saylor or anyone in between. We all get the same set of rules. So, I mean, but do you think this sort of creates a cascading effect where more and more countries say, maybe we should look at this Bitcoin thing for settling any sort of contentious trade?
Yeah, I think it definitely opens the door to that, because it's one thing to understand these things theoretically, and it's another thing to actually go out and do it. So people realize that you could put, theoretically you could put Bitcoin on the balance sheet of a corporation, but until Michael Saylor actually went out and did it in a big way and demonstrated, then most people are copycats and they want to go on a well-trod trail. I think it's hard to tell exactly what this product is. It seems to be almost like the Tony Soprano insurance product, where you might have to buy it if you're going to do business in that neighborhood. So it's not quite a true petro Bitcoin, or in the context of petrodollars, because they're not yet selling oil for Bitcoin. But it is, I think this will certainly there's a lot going on, and leaders of countries have a lot on their plate. But this would be the model. This would be sort of the MicroStrategy, or the strategy saying, look, this isn't just a theoretical avenue anymore. You can do it, and we're doing it in a big way. Their $10 billion a year revenue number seems like a lot, but people have been saying they've been charging $1 per barrel of oil or something. So maybe they could get to something like that.
I mean, it really is fascinating too. I honestly thought there was going to be, I thought that the start of the war in Ukraine, when Russia got heavily sanctioned, was going to be more of a tipping point for Bitcoin usage more broadly by sanctioned nations. It didn't really, I mean, at least to my knowledge and to people's knowledge broadly, didn't really turn into that. So, I'm curious to see if this, just because there's, not that there wasn't focus on that, but there's so much focus on this just for overall energy security of, especially, the US, we have a lot of energy, right? Europe is in a different position than we are, right? So there's a lot of focus on this. There is a lot of tension, obviously, in the region. I'm curious if you think that this at all, I don't know if you've seen, I haven't seen anything yet, any comments from the Trump administration about this specifically. If this is going to in any way, change Trump's opinion of Bitcoin. Now he's saying, these Iranians, they're using the Bitcoins to get around. And I said, play with your Bitcoins, but it's not what I meant. I'm curious, maybe you've seen something. I haven't seen anything from the admin yet, but do you think this changes their calculus at all? Or is this just something that they kind of realize, hey, well, yeah, that's kind of the whole point?
I haven't seen anything from Trump or Hegseth or from other people in the administration, but you do raise a very interesting point, which is how a lot of people are going to have to get used to the fact that Bitcoin is for enemies. So if the people who don't like Bitcoin because it's loosely associated with Trump now, or the people who are not going to like Bitcoin if it's associated with Iran, or if it's associated with, with whomever, ultimately, if you're not going to like Bitcoin because someone is using it that you don't like, that might be a bad strategy in your own life as a country or as an individual. And I think ultimately people have short memories. You know, Elizabeth Warren she'll onboard all of her wealth into Bitcoin when she needs to, and they'll just, you know, they won't talk about their previous opposition to it. But it is an interesting calculus, especially when you think of what does an administration do that's fairly pro Bitcoin and super anti Iran. Like how do they handle this? That'll be interesting to see play out, and especially the implications for 2028, like what Bitcoin is going to look like in the American presidential elections.
I am really curious. You mentioned Elizabeth Warren, and she's, you know, the senator we love to hate, right? Just because of her egregious positions on Bitcoin over the years. I'm curious how does she end up spinning something like this? I'm sure she'll come up with something very creative that will allow her to grandstand beautifully and talk about how she's a champion for the little guys and how Bitcoin's used for money laundering and all these things. But, you know, it's so interesting to watch some of these sort of, you know, theses that have been, let's say, hypothetical within Bitcoin circles, but seemingly very obvious to us. Like, of course, yeah, sanctioned nations can just use Bitcoin. Yeah, no problem. They could use stable coins, but the stable coins are advertise the fact that they are compliant. Like, it'd be kind of dumb to use the stable coins, right? Mm-hmm. And to see this stuff playing out in real time, you're a Bitcoin educator. You've been educating for a number of years on Bitcoin. You put out an incredible body of work. Is this something that you kind of said, like, you see this happening, you're like, well, yeah, duh, about time? Or is it still a little bit of a shock in terms of, wow, okay, yeah, we thought this would happen, but we didn't think it would happen like this?
I'm actually surprised it's taken this long. I made a video when the Russian in 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine and Europe and the U.S. Seized all the Russian assets, especially I was really surprised to see the Biden administration advocate for seizing U.S. dollar assets, because from Russia, you know, whatever you think about Ukraine, whatever you think about Russia, I went back and actually looked it up, and the U.S. never froze any U.S. dollar assets or deposits, even during the Cold War with the Soviet Union. I think that Iran was the one exception, which wasn't really part of the Cold War. But in 1979, with the whole thing with the Shah and Khomeini, there were U.S. dollar assets frozen. But I did make a video about it at the time, saying, if you want people to be part of your currency network, it doesn't matter how much you dislike them, even if they're on the other side of a war. It's a big mistake to kick people out of your currency network. And so I'm a little bit surprised to see Bitcoin hadn't filled. Obviously, I think Putin understands Bitcoin, and I think that, you know, Iran's mining Bitcoin, China's mining Bitcoin, Russia's mining Bitcoin. That in itself should be, if we have an AOC administration with Elizabeth Warren in 2028, maybe we should let them know that we shouldn't be the only country. We shouldn't tie our hands against potential geopolitical adversaries. But these things always it seems like the adoption always takes longer than people expect. But this could definitely be one of the dominoes that starts it rolling.
It's really going to give me nightmares with an AOC Warren ticket. I mean, that would just be, boy.
There are a lot of moving parts to get there, but
there are. But, you know, never say never, right? Anything can happen. Just on the, again, topic of kind of Elizabeth Warren, but also I don't know how much you watched of the recent Senate Banking Committee hearings leading up to the Clarity Act, you know, moving forward. The Clarity Act, I think, is a very interesting one. Not really interesting for Bitcoiners for the most part. Like, the only part of it that is interesting for Bitcoiners is what was taken from the BRCA, the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, open source developer protections, which have been, I mean, let's hope those still actually make it into the bill. A lot can change in the time.
Have they been stripped out yet? I haven't followed it that closely, but
from what I've, as of now, they're in there, but they did add a provision in there, and I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially it says that if, as a developer, you have knowledge that somebody is going to that somebody is using your service for illegal, you know, for money laundering, for whatever it might be, for anything illegal, then you are held liable. So if you know that it's happening and you let it happen, you're held liable, which I've seen various, you know, people that are much more of legal experts than I am look at this and say, well, actually, you know, this is fine. This is pretty boilerplate. Like, this doesn't really, you know, doesn't give them anything firm to go on. But then I was talking with Kyle Olney from the Bitcoin Policy Institute, and he said that the people who pushed for that provision to be added were actually a group of states attorneys general. And
Oh,
so
dear.
you have to ask yourself, well, why, if it doesn't matter, why would they want it added? Well, because it gives them a little more prosecutorial leverage, right? And so that's the part that's really concerning to me. Obviously, we've got a number of Bitcoin and crypto prisoners out there. Bill and Keone being the most recently sentenced and are currently in federal prison. Everyone, if you're listening, I will continue to beat the drum that you should go to billandkeone.org, KEONNE, and do, donate if you can, support if you can, or share it. Sharing it's absolutely free. Signing the petition's absolutely free.
Absolutely.
I hope that these guys. I've heard that Trump is looking at 250 pardons for the 250th anniversary. Let's see. Maybe, just for its mimetic power. I hope that those guys are included in that because, Matt, the thing that I struggle with is I don't know how you can claim to want to be the Bitcoin and crypto capital of the world while having open source developers rotting in federal prison. Those two things just seem fundamentally at odds to me. And I'm not sure how closely you followed the Bill and Keone, the Samurai case as well. But this was just such in my mind at least, an incredible, just a lack of justice. There was no justice served. It was quite the opposite. And when I see this stuff in the Clarity Act, I see this thing that is apparently unpalatable to some senators and some Congress people that, we can't have these open source developer protections in there. That'll look bad. I just don't get it. And it gives me very little faith in our legislative system, and I already didn't have faith in most of our judicial system with regard to this. So I don't know. There's not even necessarily a question there, I guess, but just more so the fact that it's like this was basically big crypto and big banks jockeying over stablecoin yield, basically, and then you've got the only thing that should really matter from an American freedom perspective being said like, oh, well, maybe we'll get rid of that if we need to use it as a bargaining chip. It grinds my gears a little bit, Matt. That's what I'm getting at here. I don't know again how closely you follow.
I agree with you. I agree with you, and they should not be sitting in federal prison, certainly under a Bitcoin friendly president. In terms of I haven't followed the legislation that closely, but there's an old trick that dates back. This is what I think Empress Maria Theresa did in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They were famous for having a legal code that was incredibly complicated and convoluted, a little bit like our tax code, so they can always, but the purpose of it there was if you needed to put someone in jail, there were so many laws and it was impossible to comply that they had an automatic way of putting you in jail. And so this is how nation states function. You can have laws on the books and just invoke them when it's convenient, when you need to put someone away for something. So it may be some of that, but Bitcoiners need to be aware of this because there is a creep involved where if you're going to go after at some point, if you're going to go after open source developers, you may go after node runners, and there's a slippery slope there. And so it's that old phrase, they came for the Bitcoin devs and I didn't speak out, and now they're coming for my node.
Yeah, no, it really is a slippery slope there. And there were some carve outs for self-custody. And the part that's, interesting here is it's like, of course, we don't need the government's permission, right, to do any of these things. That's the whole point of Bitcoin. It's permissionless. That being said, and my opinion on this has shifted. Initially, I was looking at what BPI was doing when I first heard about them. And I thought, well, why are we like trying to suck up to the government and, like go in there and do this? And then I realized, okay, like as a very simple heuristic, would I rather have a government full of Elizabeth Warrens or Cynthia Lummis's? And it's like, well, yeah. I'd rather have it full of Cynthia Lummis's, obviously, because they're not openly hostile and trying to call me a criminal just for using money that they don't control. And so I very quickly came around to that after thinking about it for more than about 5 seconds. But boy, what worries me too is a lot of this stuff. Okay, Clarity Act is potentially going to be law. Hopefully those developer protections are in there. But a lot of the other stuff, the strategic reserve, a lot of the executive order stuff, that's not law. That's executive order that can be overturned. I'm curious how much you've thought about just with going into the midterms as we are, if there's a blue wave now and then a blue wave for the presidency, or if we always kick the football back and forth, right? It's, Coca-Cola or Pepsi-Cola, take your pick. But how much does that potentially put Bitcoiners a little bit on the chopping block? Do you think another Democratic administration would have the same open hostility as the Biden admin did? Or has the Overton window shifted enough where, hey, more people, even on the left, are starting to realize, look, this isn't a partisan issue. This is like an American issue. It's a freedom issue. Let's not make it into a partisan football. I'd love your thoughts.
It's a really difficult question. What I would have liked to see in an ideal world, and obviously we'd never have our ideal candidate, and we have to choose between the lesser of two evils. But it would have been great if, when Trump had come in, he hadn't launched a shitcoin and shitcoin after shitcoin, and Eric Trump doing all this stuff. That would give us a little more moral high ground to stand on. And while I'm glad he's president rather than Kamala, and I'm glad Bitcoin hasn't been made illegal or Bitcoin mining hasn't been driven out of the U.S., I think I don't think the Trump administration has done a good job really delineating between crypto and Bitcoin and educating the public. And it's a hard thing to do anyway. But I fear that people will just vote with their pocketbooks, and I think it almost doesn't matter if it sort of does matter, but in the sense we are headed toward some form of sovereign debt default in the U.S. and hyperinflation that will probably take 40 years to play out, though it could happen faster. But that will drive, Bitcoin is the lifeboat, and people will discover it when they really need it. And as the example of Elizabeth Warren using Bitcoin when she can't use her US dollars anymore, there will be adoption, but at the same time, there will be a lot of, there are already a lot of people who resent Bitcoiners and think all Bitcoiners are rich or something, or think all Bitcoiners sell drugs or fund terrorists, or there's so many misunderstandings. And the U.S., if you chart the trend toward class warfare and polarization, and even families being set against each other during COVID and everything that's happened since then, I think it's almost we're headed toward conflict, and we have, no matter who's in charge of the U.S. government, there are these fiscal problems, and there will be, the government will do what it did in the 1930s when there were problems. When FDR seized all Americans' gold, and there'll be something. I could see Republicans seizing people's Bitcoin, or I could see Democrats. Like, it's just the state comes up with wears whatever mask it needs to do at the moment, and so I'm not optimistic about. I think it's going to be a very tight race between adoption and onboarding people to the life raft, and having enough people. If we just have one person in every family or one person in every neighborhood who kind of understands the difference between Bitcoin and shitcoins and understands monetary debasement, and I worry about Bitcoiners being blamed for the inflation and ridiculous things like this, and Bitcoiners are still able to put food on the table and pay the rent. And so because economics isn't taught in government schools, that somehow people will think that we stole money from them, whereas we just tried to protect our own finances. So as ever, education's at the heart of everything, and it's hard to. There's a lot of emotions. People have very short attention spans. Social media rules, so it's very hard to game out.
Well, nobody can claim that with the plethora of Bitcoin podcasts and education channels that now exist, nobody can claim we didn't try to tell them. That's the thing. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? There's so much information out there now. Yeah. I guess the problem is not finding information; it's finding the best signal amidst all that information. But still, there's we need to let more Bitcoin podcasts bloom. Until there's more Bitcoin podcasts than TradFi podcasts, I think we still have some work to do there. Matt, we are going to take a very quick, amen to that. So if you're listening to this is your sign. Go start that Bitcoin podcast. You never know who you may appeal to, who you may resonate with that somebody else has not yet. So
it's a really good point. Absolutely. Everyone has their own view of Bitcoin and can have something to contribute.
Exactly. We're going to hit a very quick commercial break, Matt, and then we're going to be right back here with more. I've got a couple of more stories that I want to review with you. A little AI's choice between Bitcoin versus stable coins, some conflicting views on that, and then also some of the recent suggestions by incoming Fed Chair Kevin Warsh about how to gauge inflation properly and some of the new metrics he's deciding to look at now to tell us that, hey, inflation's nothing to worry about again. But we'll be right back here on RoxomTV, guys. Don't touch that dial. Be back in just a moment with more from Matt Kratter. Stay tuned.
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one place.
Welcome back to RoxomTV. The price of Bitcoin is 76,758 infinitely printable Federal Reserve notes per coin. And a new debate is emerging in the AI economy. What kind of money will autonomous AI agents use to pay for things online? The Coinbase CEO recently posted on X, the agentic economy will be larger than the human economy. A growing number of developers are building machine-to-machine payment systems that let AI agents buy services, access APIs, rent compute power, and interact across the internet without human intervention. Stablecoins have quickly become a dominant option, with companies like Coinbase, Stripe-backed Tempo, and others pushing infrastructure that lets agents make tiny payments instantly. But Bitcoin developers are now making the case that the Lightning Network is a better suited solution for the long-term AI economy. The argument centers around control and privacy. A new report titled The Best Money for Agents by Matt Balas warns that stablecoins remain centrally controlled financial products. Issuers can freeze funds, block transactions, and potentially enforce identity verification requirements as regulation expands. Stablecoin transactions are also publicly visible on-chain, creating massive surveillance risks if AI agents eventually handle large portions of economic activity. By contrast, Bitcoin's Lightning Network allows instant global payments without a central issuer. Payments route through encrypted channels, are self-custodied Bitcoin, and cannot be frozen by a corporation or government intermediary. Now, this matters because AI agents may eventually become persistent economic actors operating online 24/7, 365. Major AI labs like ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini are expected to launch autonomous payment features in the future, while companies across the crypto and fintech space are now competing to shape what default money layer the AI economy will eventually become. The report also makes the case that open source AI should run on open source money. Balas argues that if the future of AI is built on decentralized permissionless software, then the payment rails powering those systems should also remain neutral and censorship resistant, rather than controlled by a handful of corporations or governments. The report ultimately argues that stablecoins may win adoption in the short term because they're easy, heavily marketed, and backed by major financial companies. But over the long arc of time, Bitcoin will have a stronger foundation. The Lightning Network is open, decentralized, censorship resistant, and does not depend on the permission of a company or state actor to function. That makes Bitcoin uniquely aligned with the idea that autonomous AI agents will be operating freely across the internet. I'd like to bring back in Matthew Kratter from Bitcoin University. Matt, we were just chatting offline about this a bit too, and talking about the BPI study that's out there as well. People can go to moneyforai.org if they'd like to check that out. But that basically showed that whether it be store of value, unit of account, or unit of account, the Bitcoin option won over stablecoins when they surveyed a bunch of AI agents. Now, medium of exchange, stablecoins in this study did actually win out. They eked out a little bit in that category specifically, also in the settlement category. But I'm curious of your thoughts on this, because to me it just seems sort of like a no-brainer that eventually, even the agents will come around to the fact that neutral money, permissionless money, makes a lot more sense if you want to actually operate autonomously. That whole idea of asking permission but operating autonomously seems like a little bit of a catch-22 there. But I'd love your thoughts.
It's an interesting couple of studies. I think to the extent that so much depends on the training data, obviously, for these agents. So if they're originally trained on normie NPCs, they'll of course prefer stablecoins and dollars. But if they have the ability to learn, they'll be just like you and me. The first time PayPal shuts down our account, or the bank doesn't let us withdraw as much cash as we want to. Hopefully the AI agents are as smart as you and me. They're probably much smarter at a certain point. And so they'll inevitably end up choosing Bitcoin for the same reason we were talking about in the previous segment, that Iran and everyone else will be driven to Bitcoin.
So it's a really interesting point about the training data, because another part of the BPI study specifically broke down between Claude Opus 4.6, GPT 5.2, Gemini 3.1, and Grok 4, what each of those models specifically preferred. And so Claude Opus 4.6 preferred Bitcoin in a landslide, over 76%, stablecoins at 16%, and fiat and bank money at 5.2%. Grok similarly preferred Bitcoin 50%, stablecoins 44.4%, so close, fiat and bank money 3.6%. But then you look at Gemini, and Gemini was stablecoins by a long shot, 56 versus 37%. But of course, Gemini is also the one that made George Washington black when that model came out. And then fiat and bank money, though, didn't even make it onto the table there. Other crypto made it at 2.8%. And then I think perhaps most surprisingly or just strangely, GPT 5.2 preferred stablecoins. Okay, fine. Same as, 38.9%, same as or similar to Gemini. But then they put fiat and bank money at 37.7%, Bitcoin all the way down at 18%. So I have to wonder, how do you reach that conclusion? Okay, I can see the argument for doing stable coins, but how could you possibly, if you're trying to operate a 24/7, 365 autonomous agent economy, how could you come to the conclusion that, yep, I should use the traditional banking system that is only open 5 days a week from 9 to 5 and is closed on the plethora of bank holidays? I don't get how you make that leap.
Yeah, I don't either. Though I would have guessed that Grok would have picked Dogecoin, because all we need to do is make the blocks faster and bigger, as Elon told us in 2021, and that's going to be better than Bitcoin. So I'm a little surprised Grok didn't learn that from Elon.
Yeah. Apparently, it must have missed that memo. It is very interesting too. This kind of brings up a larger topic. You really, with the exception of Gemini, they're making crypto 2.8% of its choice. You don't really see the crypto, because I would put stable coins as separate from crypto, right? It's a fundamentally kind of different ball game there. But I've been really kind of tracking over the past, last year, but especially the past few months. It feels to me like all the crypto casino CEOs are sort of tacitly admitting that the jig is up a little bit when it comes to the crypto world. That's why they're, at least in my opinion, that's why they all pivoted basically at the same time, whether it be Gemini, Coinbase, Robinhood, which is also basically a crypto casino now too, and heavily gamified as well. Mm-hmm. They all pivoted to adding prediction markets in, at the exact same time. And I just wonder if that's to me, and I'd be curious of your thoughts, but to me, that just seems like sort of an admission that okay, we know we've been doing kind of undercover gambling this whole time with all these shitcoin tokens. Now let's just mask off, just make it real gambling. Just do prediction markets. Let's just give the people what they want, which is just good old fashioned gambling. We'll stop trying to put the crypto in between and call things DeFi when they're not. But I'm curious if you've noticed that trend as well, and if you think sort of there's a growing realization that maybe the the game is up on the shitcoin casino front.
Yeah, it certainly seems to be that, and I would agree with you and argue that prediction markets, they do have their problems, and the biggest problem, the sort of unstated elephant in the room here is we live on a fiat standard, and why do people want to gamble so much? It's because they're hopeless and asset prices are inflating and the money's debasing, and so that's the basic backdrop. So then the question, if you're going to have people gambling, should they be playing slot machines or crypto or prediction markets? And if you gave me that choice, I would definitely say prediction markets, because at least the rest of us who aren't gambling can sometimes get some good takeaways from those prediction markets. And it's still unclear how gameable they are, but to the extent we can get global, very deep, liquid markets, maybe we don't want to market in, will a country be destroyed by a nuclear bomb by a certain date, because we don't want to encourage certain payouts. But I think there's crowdsourcing information can be very, very interesting. So it's an improvement, I think, prediction markets over, but obviously prediction markets that are predicting stuff that's going to happen an hour from now, not super useful and not super low time preference either.
Yeah, there are definitely, I'm not, first of all, people do whatever you want with your money. If you want to gamble instead of just holding Bitcoin, fine, your funeral. But prediction markets obviously there is value there. Like there is that wisdom of the crowd, right? And people actually being forced to put their money where their mouth is. But at the same time, you look at the volume on these things and it's like 80% just like sports betting contracts. And so it's like, okay, so we're just doing sports betting most of the time. Like there is some useful stuff in there, but it's like, come on guys, we're just doing sports betting and using the whole prediction market thing to get around your state regulations, which like, fine, I appreciate your ingenuity, but like, let's just be honest about what it is. It is interesting though.
Even for the election in the 2016 Trump election, I'd bet some money offline that speaking of gambling, I'd bet with my father or I bet with as many people as I could that Trump was going to win, because I could see the signs. And I remember I don't know what prediction market it was, but there was one I was watching in 2016 on election day and the night before. And it was completely useless. Like it'd go from 80% down to 20%, and it was very volatile. And there was still, I think there was about $100 million, if I remember right, being exchanged, but wow. That wasn't deep enough. Like even 4 hours before the polls closed on that election Tuesday, it still couldn't figure out if Hillary or Trump was going to win.
I
think the S&P market figured it out faster. Like the S&P started selling off fairly hard and then realized that probably wasn't the end of the world.
It is interesting, because then you fast forward to this past election and, the prediction markets got it before the pollsters did, right? Which was, I think, really fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
You could argue Bitcoin was also kind of a leading indicator there as well. But it is really fascinating to watch this stuff. And I think your larger point is really important to reiterate, just this idea that, okay, well, this stuff's happening, but why is it happening? Well, it's happening because this is what happens in fiat decline, right? People they don't think long-term. They look for it's not how can I save wealth slowly? It's how can I get rich quick? Because I need to do something to get ahead, something to get off the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you've got, this is the other topic I wanted to bring up with you is incoming Fed chair, Kevin Warsh. He's basically just decided, or I don't think it's an official decision yet, but basically said that he prefers looking at a different inflation gauge. Right now, basically, for those who aren't familiar, we look at core, or the Fed. We don't. The cabal at the Fed looks at core PCE. It's currently running at 3.2%. Now that excludes food and energy, because who needs those when you're calculating inflation, right? Let's just strip out the base layer of everything and the stuff that you need to survive. But okay, Warsh supports going to trimmed mean PCE, which currently sits at 2.36%. And that one just basically, anytime there's an extreme monthly price swing, it just takes it out. So it's just smoothing it out as much as possible. But this is kind of the crazy thing. It's like there's just this constant gaslighting where it's like the money is fake. They print it out of thin air. The metrics by which they supposedly measure the rate of theft from you are also fake. They change them at the drop of a hat, or they change the basket of goods that people are looking at. None of this is real. And then there's this sort of passive, talk about the cost of living going up, which I think is a very insidious way to talk about these things. It makes it sound like, well, yeah, I don't know, just the cost of living just goes up. We don't know why. Who can say? It's like
it must be price gouging from the corporations, right?
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Elizabeth Warren. That you've hit the nail right on the head there. But this is just kind of crazy to me, and this is against the backdrop of Jesse Myers-Crozius just put out a kind of little mini analysis today showing that just in this last year, the world overall printed 9.3% more money. Global M2 went up to 141 trillion by 2026, and only 4.6% of that M2 expansion over the last 12 months was in the U.S. So we're doing better than 13.6% in China. But again, this is all just kind of insane. It's like this is all of this gambling and degeneracy that we see kind of caused by this high time preference fiat requirement is a problem of our own making, right? And I don't say our as in like you and I didn't choose to print this money, right? But our as the collective. And I just wonder, what does it take for people to actually wake up and realize that they're being stolen from by inflation, that this is all just, the books are cooked, the numbers are faked, the money that they're counting is printed out of thin air anyway. You have kind of one thing that doesn't have counterparty risk and is absolutely finite, and that's Bitcoin. But still, it just feels like, I don't know, somehow even with all the corporate adoption, all the Overton window shift of nation states, it still feels like for the average person, Bitcoin is still not something that the vast majority of people are paying attention to. But I'm curious if you have that same impression, or if you think we're just one more pump away from more people paying attention. Always a little NGU marketing tends to help. But what's your perspective on that?
Well, I'll answer that question, but before that, I actually wanted to drop a really weird fact that
Sure.
that most people won't believe, even though it's true. But Kevin Warsh actually was my college roommate senior year at Stanford. I'm not making this up.
Wow.
So I lived with there were 6 guys. I drew a bad draw card. There was a housing shortage at Stanford at the time because of the Loma Prieta earthquake, and so it was basically gambling to try to get a roof over your head. And my group of friends got split up, and I got put with this other group of guys that I didn't know, and they were very hard partiers, and they enjoyed drinking a lot of beer and smoking a lot of pot. But the one guy who abstained from all of that, and was actually a really nice guy, and who obviously had his, this was before Clinton didn't inhale, so he didn't even know that lesson. But Kevin Warsh didn't really drink and certainly didn't smoke pot, and was a great roommate, was always very nice to me, very considerate. He ended up marrying a billionaire's daughter. I think it's the L'Oreal fortune. And he was, kind of, he has a good track record from the great financial crisis, where, if I remember correctly, he was not happy with Bernanke, he was not happy with the money printing. And he said that's why he resigned from the Fed, or he stopped being a governor. Basically, his mother was good friends with George W. Bush. She was a wealthy woman who lived in Beverly Hills, and she got him into the Fed. So this is how these things work. But anyway, great guy, very intelligent, studied public policy at Stanford, absolutely understands how the economy works, understands money printing, everything. And this is one of the tragedies of the fiat world, that just a great guy like that would become an awful central banker. And I'm sure he's still a great guy and a great father and a great husband. In terms of people,
that's wild. Also,
isn't that?
I was not expecting that. Yeah,
it's totally bizarre. But I should have. I haven't spoken to him since senior year. So, what good does it give me? I can't even trade on federal funds changing, do insider trading. But I think to your greater point, people don't understand. And this was something I didn't understand even well into my TradFi career, where I was making good money. And a lot of that money just went into like T-bills and cash, because it was like, wow, I made some money now. I've got a cushion. And I didn't even realize like how fast the dollar was. And I'm working for a hedge fund. I'm very financially sophisticated. And I also, part of it is, just how dangerous Wall Street is and how dangerous financial products are. So you're like, just give me those T-bills. And T-bills back then were at 5 or 6%, and the inflation rate was much lower than it was now. So it wasn't a completely irrational thing. And I was working for a hedge fund, so there was a lot of career volatility as well. But I realized how long it took me. It probably took me till about 2020 to really realize, like, you should not be holding US dollars, very much of it. I kind of knew this, but I didn't know the reasons why. And I never understood all the Bogle, Jack Bogle, the Bogle head saying, you got a dollar cost average in the S&P 500. I didn't quite understand how that was driven by monetary debasement. And so we've always had, this is why it makes some sense at times to buy a house, so you can hedge out, prevent future rent increases, and you can borrow money that, your debt gets, your asset prices go up and your debt becomes small relative to that. But most people don't understand this even outside the context of Bitcoin. I was a CFA charter holder. I was working for a $2 billion hedge fund, and I didn't understand it. So I'm not optimistic at all about people understanding it.
Hey, boy, that is a bit of a black pill, honestly.
But maybe
it's realistic.
In Weimar, Germany, people did figure out that you should have wheelbarrows full of, or I guess people, Americans won't figure it out, but Argentinians, a lot of people in countries with currencies that are hyperinflating or that used to be hyperinflating, they understand when you get paid on Friday, you go immediately and you buy your groceries with that. And if you have extra left over, you buy like a moped or a bicycle or something that will kind of hold value better than the local currency. So I think it's just like the AI agents, and we all have to learn by getting wrecked by fiat.
It's funny. My father-in-law, fascinating guy, and escaped communism, and he would always say to me, he's like, Walker, realistically, most people don't get smart by choice. You get smart by force, and that's just the reality of it. You don't get smart, and some people do. Like people who got into Bitcoin really early and got smart, like they deserve it. Those OG whales deserve those gains. You got smart by choice, or you can say you got lucky, but it's like it takes more than just luck to actually hold on to your keys.
Hodling is so hard. You can be
very hard.
You can be a 200 IQ genius, and you still might not be able to hodl.
And there's probably plenty of those who did not end up hodling or went into launch whatever shitcoin or whatever else, and
actually, the smarter you are, the more problems you realize there are with Bitcoin too. And so then you freak yourself out and sell it. So there's that too. And this is the reason that I think a lot of Bitcoin devs end up selling their Bitcoin, because they're too close to the sausage factory and they're like, oh my gosh. But somehow Bitcoin continues in spite of all this.
Yeah, you got to being a little bit dumb is sometimes a bit of a superpower. It's
the midwits do well,
right?
Midwits do well.
Yeah,
or sometimes they do well.
Yeah. Oh, well, Matt, I really appreciate this. Really glad we got a chance to chat here. It was great to pick your brain. Before we let you go, I do want to give you a chance. Just where can people find you? Check out all of your videos, your educational videos. I know you do YouTube and X. You post them all over the place. But where can people find you and give you a follow?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube. You can just search. The channel's name is Matthew Kratter's Bitcoin University. But if you just type in Bitcoin University, I'm also on X at Matt Kratter, MattKratter, and I'm also on Nostr under my name as well. So I encourage people to use all of those and get familiar with Nostr as well, because one of these days we all might need it.
Amen to that. Better to need it, or let's say have it and not need it, than to need it and not have it and not know how it works. So, and the UI UX has gotten a lot better recently as well for folks
Definitely.
who tried it out. Yeah, because I know a lot of people tried it out initially, call it a year or so into its real development, and then said, well, this is crap. I'm not dealing with this. Give it another shot if you haven't. It's light years ahead of where it was, and a lot of cool stuff being built over there. So,
absolutely. Download one of the apps for your phone, and it's a great way of doing it.
Yeah. Well, Matt, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Everybody, make sure to go give Matt a follow as well. You've got me for one more hour here on RoxomTV, everyone, for this Tuesday marathon. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we will be back with more here on RoxomTV. So don't touch that dial. I will see you in a moment.
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one place.
Imagine a constant Bitcoin cash flow. How about earning BTC every 2 weeks? Now you can buy Strive and Stretch on Roxom and stack Bitcoin every 2 weeks. That's the Bitcoin paycheck.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick, monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin! Come on, little buddy! Bitcoin! I need you! Don't go!
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one place.
How about stretch preferred stock on Roxom? Receive 11.5% monthly cash dividends paid in Bitcoin.
11.5% paid in Bitcoin? How is that possible?
It's real. Stretch dividends on Roxom gives 11.5% monthly cash dividends paid in Bitcoin.
Dang! I want everyone pitching Roxom to your clients. Corporate traders, asset managers, old, young, Stretch on Roxom is for everyone.
Now that's a birthday gift. 11.5% in Bitcoin.
11.5. We are in heaven at 11.5. 11.5%. 11.5%.
Welcome back to RoxomTV. The price of Bitcoin is 76,831 infinitely printable Federal Reserve notes per coin. We're about to be joined in a moment by Jesse Brooks, the General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer at Ribbit Capital. Before we do that, I'm going to lead you in with a little story that we're going to dig into with Jesse, because the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission is preparing a major regulatory shift that could allow blockchain-based versions of stocks to trade legally on crypto platforms and tokenized exchanges. According to a new Bloomberg report, the SEC is working on an innovation exemption framework that would allow tokenized equities to trade under a regulated structure while the agency develops long-term rules for on-chain securities markets. The move would mark one of the clearest signs yet that Wall Street and Washington are preparing for stock markets to move onto blockchain rails. Earlier this year, the SEC already approved NASDAQ's proposal to allow certain stocks and ETFs to trade in tokenized form using blockchain infrastructure. Eligible assets initially include companies in the Russell 1000 and major index ETFs. SEC Commissioner Hester Pierce has repeatedly argued that tokenized securities remain subject to existing securities laws, but says blockchain technology could modernize capital markets and improve efficiency. The bigger picture is that traditional finance is rapidly moving toward 24/7 markets, instant settlement, and programmable assets, whether they like it or not. NASDAQ, the NYSE, Kraken, Robinhood, and major banks are all racing to build tokenized trading infrastructure. And now I'd like to bring in Jesse Brooks. Again, Jesse is the General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer at Ribbit Capital. Jesse, how are you?
Hi, it's nice to be here and thanks for having me. It's a really exciting time in the legal regulatory space in crypto, so lots to talk about.
Yeah, I'm great to have you here, and I'm curious of your read on this. I go back and forth with this as to whether or not this is, sort of the crypto space eating Wall Street, or the other way around. Is it Wall Street eating the crypto space? What's your read on this? Is this sort of something that it was being forced upon a lot of Wall Street, sort of against their will, or are they finally coming around to the fact that, hey, technology moves fast, maybe we need to get with the times?
I think the right vision for all this is that there isn't a separation between the crypto side of the universe and the traditional Wall Street side of the universe. And that is what the SEC is sort of dragging us both into, both sides of this, because they're trying to implement a lot of the existing rules for securities on top of crypto. And we can talk about that particularly with clarity, but they're simultaneously trying to tell Wall Street, like, we are going to allow you to innovate in a way that's safe and to permit you to compete with crypto. The problem here, in my mind, is that tokenized securities mean everything and nothing, right? Like, a dream world is that everything is tokenized and moves fast and immediate, but that's probably not what's going to happen. We're going to have tokenized versions of securities, and then we're going to have not tokenized version of securities that are sort of in the traditional markets. And are they the same? Do they map against each other? Is an issuer going to say, I only want to tokenize my securities, I only don't want to tokenize my securities? And how do transfer agents and all the intermediaries operate in this space? The news of today or of yesterday is not really news. I don't want to take like air out of anyone's tires, because the innovation exemption specifics are gonna be really interesting, but we don't know any of those yet. This is like rumors about what they're about, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's pretty accurate, because the SEC has been saying this over and over again. You laid out some of the news items, but there's many more.
Yeah, it is really, really interesting to watch this unfold. And you mentioned clarity, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that as well, because I know you've been following this pretty closely, as I think a lot of people have. Quite a lot of people tuned into that Senate Banking Committee hearing. It was pretty shocking. I saw like over 400,000 on X alone at one point. I was like, wow, this is this is incredible. You know, this is like
Yeah, I
apparently
thought
a
I
lot of
was the
people
only
care.
one who like listened to C-SPAN on the weekend. So yeah.
Yeah, and you're not alone, not alone. But I'm curious of your read on this now as it starts to move forward. Obviously, it got out of the Senate Banking Committee. There's still work to do there. There's probably some more horse trading that's going to go on. The big battle amidst clarity, though, seemed to be the tension between sort of big crypto, let's say Coinbase, for example, and the legacy banking system as it related to yield on stable coins. There was obviously there's a lot of other stuff in there as well, but what parts of clarity were you sort of honing in on from your perspective?
So although the stablecoin interest component of Clarity got the most news and attention from the White House and a lot of the crypto industry, it's actually such a big bill that there's so many components of it that need to be considered. The stablecoin interest issue became the big one because it held up the last markup. But essentially what happened this time is it got out of the Senate Banking Committee with a number of amendments, and that's what the markup was that everyone was watching and everyone seemed really, really interested in. But I just want to like take a step back because Clarity you can think of as like the Dodd-Frank for crypto. So it is humongous, and trying to understand it all takes a lot of work and time. Like it is trying to define what the SEC can do, what the CFTC can do, what DeFi can do, what the DOJ can do, what Treasury can do, and there's more than that, but like I don't want to bore with all the acronyms, et cetera. You know, so it is trying to do a lot, and expecting Congress to understand all of those is really, really hard. I mean, there's a bazillion things happening in the world right now, and trying to understand what DeFi is, let alone what an ancillary asset is very, very complicated. So the good news is that it got out of committee on a bipartisan basis. So 2 Democrats voted to get the current version out of the Senate Banking Committee, but they did caveat and say this doesn't mean we're going to give a yes in, you know, during the big vote because of the ethics provision. So in my mind, we're pretty good on the stablecoin interest. And there's some illicit finance DeFi things to be worked out, and I'm happy to speak about those, but we're closer there. The biggest issue is ethics provision and what we can get, because it should be a bipartisan issue to get some sort of protections in there for consumers from like ethical violations, you know, with people in power. That's like a no-brainer. But how that's worded so that the White House will sign it is going to be the next huge fight.
Yeah, that is you know, maybe a little bit contentious given some of the shit coins that were launched
Correct.
by our commander in chief right before taking office. You mentioned some of the kind of, sort of illicit finance back and forth that's been going on. Can you unpack that part a little bit more?
Sure. It's very confusing, but at high level, it's developers of protocols that don't control any part of DeFi want to be protected from BSA obligations, so any KYC, AML stuff, more acronyms, but also from prosecution under 1960. And 1960 came up a lot in the bill, but 1960 is money service business statute. So it's the criminal statute that was used to go after people like Tornado Cash, although there were other charges associated with Tornado Cash, but that's the one that's the hot item. So a lot of the debate around illicit finance was, how can we protect developers from these kinds of prosecutions? But at the same time, multiple billions of dollars have been stolen by North Korea from DeFi protocols. And so there's a lot of concern of how do we protect, 1, consumers, 2, our national security, and 3, the whole American innovative market that like is the whole point of all this, from intrusions when no one is taking responsibility for vulnerabilities on protocols. And like another layer on this, and this is sort of my narrative that hasn't yet come up, is like, how does this all work with the increasing cyber intrusions with tools like Mythos when it comes out? How does that all play in? So there's this interesting balance because Republicans and Democrats largely see this issue slightly differently, not in goal, but in how they're attacking this bill. So Republicans are thinking about it from, well, we want to let this market develop. We want to work with, you know, companies to make sure that there are rules in place that work for them. While a lot of the Democrats, and this is a generalization, are looking at like, we want to regulate it because we want to keep it safe for consumers, and we also want to keep bad actors out of there because, I mean, $4.5 billion is the current estimate of what North Korea has hacked from DeFi to put into their nuclear weapon development program. So there's like somewhat of a tension on how people are approaching this bill from both sides, but they have the same goal of regulating, right? And making it a safe space. But coming under that is sort of the DeFi side of it, of how do we make sure that DeFi is protected and that people can still develop and grow and put code out there without being at risk of, enforcement actions.
Yeah, the sort of the BRCA portions, the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act that was rolled into Clarity, that's, at least to me, the most kind of intriguing and important part, because stablecoin, you had like let the banks and big crypto fight over that, whatever. But open source developer protections is something that I care deeply about. I am not a developer. I'm a podcaster, a broadcaster, but we are the shield so that they may be the tip of the spear, right? But the part to me that's always kind of just I can't quite take seriously is when they bring up these amounts like, well, look, 4.3 billion from North Korea hacked to these DeFi protocols. And, again, a lot of these DeFi protocols are decentralized in name only, right? We had the Arbitrum hack where they just, it's not decentralized at all. They just froze the funds and sent them to another address. So like it's fake DeFi. But the other point here is that, okay, you can say, well, that's a lot of money, but it's like JP Morgan Chase laundered what, 1.4 billion for Jeffrey Epstein alone. Like, like that, like that's one guy that they like. And so all of these things still happen. To pretend that they're a unique problem in the Bitcoin or crypto space, to me, is always just sort of like seemingly an Elizabeth Warren talking point. You know what I mean? Where she's like, well, we got it. It's money laundering didn't exist until Bitcoin and crypto came along, and now we've got all of it here. And it's like, come on, guys, let's be honest. The total amount of money that is, fraudulently sent or is used in scams or is laundered through illicit financial channels is like infinitesimal in the Bitcoin and crypto space compared to the fiat rails. So there's not even a question.
On that a little.
It's so hard to take it seriously. No, go for it.
Yeah, I will never stand up for anyone who remotely helped Jeffrey Epstein. F all those people. So I agree with you on the JP Morgan side. I agree with you on any financial institution that built that out. As someone who worked in national security and saw how money flows to North Korea, to terrorist groups, et cetera, and how crypto flows, there is good and bad between the two. But I think the narrative of going in and saying, oh, it's just as bad in TradFi or it's worse in TradFi, one, isn't a good narrative, and two, defeats why I think you and I are so excited and building in the space. Like, we want to be better. And it goes back to the whole like, well, this person did it, so I'm fine. Like, I think we're all trying to build a safer space. And for better or for worse, if something bad happens in traditional finance, there is accountability. Now, it might take years and there might not actually be accountability at the end, but there's a way to do it. So there's a huge fear of like, there are hundreds of thousands of consumers, a lot of really vulnerable people who lose their money in these hacks. It's not just about DPRK getting nuclear weapons. It's about these people that just have nowhere to go. Like, on the side, I try and help them pro bono because it is impossible to figure it out. And the way there's so much transparency of the blockchain, which is the best part about prosecuting these cases, to be honest, and getting bad guys, but it moves at such a speed that the off-ramps are sort of off access. So that's why I think Clarity is really trying to do a lot of work here to say, we want to keep the regulated entities in the United States. So if a bad person comes in and tries to take your money, we can hold them accountable, but also DeFi, we want to let you be decentralized and still have some sort of escape hatch here. So if you have some sort of protocol built in that allows you to stop for an imminent threat, they call it, like stop funds, you're not necessarily centralized. And that is the balance that I think we need to get at, because Warren definitely took it too far. I'm not going to say that like anything she's saying is true, but there's bank coalitions, there's DeFi coalitions, there's so many coalitions coming and talking and representing themselves for Clarity. There is no one coming in and representing the victims. So I just want to like remind everybody of that.
That's totally fair. And, I'm not trying to say like, oh yeah, well, this happens in the fiat world, so we should,
Totally.
like let it happen here. More so though, like, okay, in the quote DeFi space, because I think there is also a separation between, for example, what the prosecution that was levied against the Samurai Wallet developers, where even FinCEN themselves said, nope, these guys are not operating a money transmitter business. They don't need a money transmitter license. They never have custody of funds. SDNY went after them anyway and hid the fact that they talked to FinCEN for, they hid it for what, 6 months into trial. It was only revealed then. So there's a difference between that where they have absolutely no control of who uses it and no way to stop it. And then these protocols that, say that they're DeFi, but it's like, if you have a central party that can unilaterally stop a transaction or freeze it, like, we just need to stop, like, just drop the D. It's just It's just finance. It's just finance,
But like I agree, drop the D, because you're giving all the like people who are actually DeFi a bad name for sure. For consumers interacting in the space, they don't freaking know. So like, I just keep coming back to like the people being affected. Like, what are we all doing this for? We're building it for a better financial system. And the most important thing in a better financial system, maybe not the most important thing, but one of the most important things is that people feel secure with their wallet or with their transaction or with their information or with their data, right? And feeling secure is just not been top line item for a lot of consumers that are interacting with DeFi or just DeFi. I don't know which one.
No, it is a great point. That's why I always recommend people. It's like, boy, if you want to play around with DeFi, you do whatever you want. It's your money. But if you want to build wealth slowly, well, Bitcoin's waiting for you whenever you're ready. And Bitcoin, the beauty about it is that it's also money for enemies, let's say. And I think this brings us to our next story, because I did want to get your take on this as well, because Iran has reportedly launched this Hormuz Safe. It's a new Bitcoin-enabled maritime insurance and transit platform tied to shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. And according to Bloomberg and Iran International, the initiative is connected to Iranian authorities and entities linked to the newly created Persian Gulf Strait Authority, which was established after recent security escalations around the waterway. And just weeks ago, Tether froze roughly $344 million worth of USDT in coordination with OFAC and U.S. law enforcement. And blockchain analytics firms linked the wallets to Iranian-linked entities, including addresses associated with the Central Bank of Iran. And this sort of gives us a pretty stark difference between stable coins and Bitcoin in this regard. Stable coins can be frozen by the issuers because issuers exist. Bitcoin cannot, because it is an asset without an issuer. Now, this Hormuz Safe platform allows maritime insurance and transit-related payments to be settled in Bitcoin, giving Iran a sanctions-resistant payment rail around one of the world's most important energy choke points. Before the official rollout, Reuters reported that Greek maritime risk firm Maersk warned ships about suspicious actors demanding Bitcoin payments for safe passage through Hormuz while impersonating Iranian authorities. Multiple vessels were later attacked during regional tensions. Now, Hormuz accounts for roughly 20% of global oil and liquefied natural gas flows, and Iran is now allegedly attempting to formalize Bitcoin-based payment and insurance frameworks around that choke point, routing around the exact enforcement mechanism that just froze hundreds of millions in stablecoins tied to Iranian-linked entities. And for Bitcoin, this is another real-world example of why neutral money matters. Jesse, I'd love to bring you back in on this, because we were just chatting offline a bit before this, that you actually have some experience specifically prosecuting around Iran. Can you talk about that a little bit, and what jumped out at you from this story? I don't know if we don't have concrete proof that this is real yet. I don't think we've seen anything that's like definitive, but it's being widely reported. It's certainly interesting. What's your take?
It's such a fascinating story. And Iran has had like a number of announcements associated with crypto lately, and trying to find different ways to use crypto to get around sanctions. Whether you believe in sanctions or not, like the US-based sanctions in particular. They're calling it insurance, but to me, it's just like a toll to Iran for keeping them safe when they go through the Strait of Hormuz. So is this going to work? I think commercially it could work, but there's a lot of problems associated with it, which I don't think we need to go into here. Just to talk about like the like narrative I'm getting from this, plus how I, take my prior experience into it. So I was a national security prosecutor that was largely doing child pornography cases and just like terrorist cases, ISIS, etc., all financial. And that's how I came into crypto like 11 years ago, because someone was using Bitcoin for this. Back then, there were like a few other tokens, but Bitcoin was like the only one that was really used. And I remember we went after the Al-Qassam brigades, which is the violent side of Hamas, which you may have heard about a little bit. And after we did this, which is when we just seized the wallets that had Bitcoin in it and a few other tokens, they officially stated, we are not going to use Bitcoin anymore. And so over the past like 6 to 9 years, there's been a lot of, and I don't want to call out Tether because there's been a lot of bad activity in certain of these chains, but with sophistication and the growth of the regulated market, Tether, as you pointed out, but many other platforms are cooperating with law enforcement and deciding, do we want to cooperate with the Israeli government? Do we want to cooperate with the US government? And this has impacted Novitex, which is essentially Iran's Coinbase. And so what the shift is showing me and signaling for all of us is exactly what you said, that it used to be that we got to get off Bitcoin. We got to go to something faster and cheaper, like Tron platform is one that's used a lot because it can move fast and it's cheap. And now it's sort of a revert back because of the success of these efforts. And I just think that that is, it's a good and bad signal. It shows that Bitcoin is a real place if you want security from governments and sanctions and oversight in many ways, but also how are we going to address that if we want to fight Iran or other bad actors who are utilizing this? And so the flow of where this is going to go is going to be fascinating because Iran is not stopping here. They are getting really good at crypto, and that is helping some of their people as well who can't get access to any financial services right now.
Yeah, it is the kind of the beauty of Bitcoin, right? Is that, look, it doesn't matter if you're Iran or the United States, or if you're you or me or Michael Saylor or anyone in between. Bitcoin doesn't care, right? It's agnostic. Anyone can use it. Everyone has the same rules. And, some folks may not like that, but that's also the entire point of it, right? Is that, look, you can't block anyone from using it. You can't stop a transaction. You can't, censor somebody from using Bitcoin, and you can't sanction them from using Bitcoin. Like, that is a powerful thing. And I think it's very interesting too, against the juxtaposition of how pro Bitcoin this administration has been. Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, multiple admirals talking about, running Bitcoin nodes and looking at this for national security reasons. Like, it's pretty fascinating to put that against the backdrop of, hey, Iran's like, well, we can use it too. What a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive.
Well, Jesse, I want to be conscious of your time here. I know we're butting up right in the end of it. So just want to give you a chance. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us here on RoxomTV. Where do you want to send folks who maybe liked what you had to say and want a little bit more?
Just instead of reading Twitter about regulatory issues, just dig a little bit deeper, call your friends who are a lawyer, thank the person working on policy, because we're all in this together, and it's really important to understand the nuance of everything happening, because frequently you can't do it just on Twitter. So be good, be nice, be a good person. I really loved being on with you. This was a refreshing conversation.
Well, the pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much. Appreciate you joining us here on Roxom. Looking forward to having you back. And guys, you have me for another 30 minutes today, so we'll say goodbye to Jesse. We will take a quick break here on Roxom, and then you will be right back here with me again. So don't touch that dial. Stay tuned. We'll be right back here with more on RoxomTV.
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one place.
Oh, I forgot to mention, dividends on Roxom are paid in Bitcoin. Stretch your income, 11.5% paid in Bitcoin.
Stretch your income to 11.5, get 11.5 in Bitcoin and Roxom. 11.5%. 11.5%.
Welcome back to RoxomTV. The price of Bitcoin is 76,834 infinitely printable Federal Reserve notes per Bitcoin. And Bitcoin treasury company Strive announced it purchased an additional 382 BTC for roughly 30.3 million, bringing the company's total holdings to 15,391 Bitcoin. The latest buy moves Strive to number 9 on the Bitcoin 100 corporate treasury rankings. Strive chairman and CEO Matt Cole posted on X that the company acquired the Bitcoin at an average price of roughly $79,348 per coin. He also shared updated metrics showing Strive's Bitcoin yield has reached 18.4% year to date with 44.3% amplification ratio. The purchase comes during a massive week for the company. Last Friday, Cole rang the opening bell at NASDAQ as Strive continued pushing its Bitcoin-backed credit strategy deeper into traditional finance. Strive also recently announced it will become the world's first daily dividend-paying Bitcoin-backed credit issuer starting June 16th. The move is designed to turn Bitcoin volatility in credit markets into daily shareholder payouts, part of the company's broader push into what executives describe as digital credit. At the same time, the $33 billion New Jersey Police and Firemen's Retirement System disclosed its first Bitcoin treasury stock purchase through Strive, another sign institutional allocators are increasingly using Bitcoin treasury companies as a bridge into Bitcoin exposure. For Bitcoin markets, the trend is becoming harder to ignore. Public companies are no longer just holding Bitcoin, they are building entirely new financial products around it. And, worth noting on this, it's a Strategy and Saylor were obviously the vanguard in this respect. Saylor also kind of coining that term digital credit and developing some of these first instruments. Obviously, Stretch, namely among them, which has taken a lot of the attention recently. It will be interesting to see if Saylor counters back and offers an hourly dividend, something like that, just to to take it one step further, not to be bested. But it really is fascinating because this trend doesn't seem to be slowing down. And while I am generally of the opinion that eventually every company has a Bitcoin treasury, but in terms of Bitcoin treasury companies, and this is just my personal opinion, I think that it's going to be sort of a couple of winners take most situation. Just because if you're looking specifically for the sort of exposure to Bitcoin with a little bit of increased volatility, than traditional just holding spot Bitcoin, you're going to look to one of these guys that is going to be holding the most Bitcoin. Strategy has 865,000 something in that range Bitcoin. Obviously, far and away more than anyone else. Nobody's going to catch them at this point. Nation states will not even be able to catch them at this point. But to see what Strive is doing is, I think, super, super interesting. Again, I think all of these things are very good for Bitcoin. You also see these treasury companies. I mean, just between Strive and Strategy, you see them buying up a massive chunk of Bitcoin every single week. I mean, this is there is a infinite wall of demand, and that's just from a couple of treasury companies. It's not to mention all of retail. It's not to mention all the institutional buying through IBIT or other Bitcoin ETF vehicles. And it does seem that, boy, you know, what happens when an unstoppable force, which is infinite fiat demand, meets an immovable object, which is absolutely finite, 21 million Bitcoin supply? Well, it gets interesting. I think that is for sure. Now, questions remain this morning after a federal jury rejected Elon Musk's lawsuit against OpenAI. Despite the legal win, Sam Altman is facing damaging testimony from former colleagues who accused him of being dishonest, raising real questions about his reputation with future investors. Ryan Brooks reports.
Elon Musk lost his lawsuit against ChatGPT maker OpenAI on Monday after a jury in California said he waited too long to bring his lawsuit against the AI company. Stavros Kadinis is a law professor at UC Berkeley.
The statute of limitations in this case is the general statute of limitations that California applies, which is 3 years. And here he had a really kind of difficult task because he had to convince the jury to exercise an equitable power, the power to correct a wrong. And it's very hard to convince the jury to correct this wrong, this mistake, if there is a lot of time that has passed since that mistake was first known and he didn't bring a lawsuit earlier.
The Oakland jury found OpenAI was not liable to the world's richest person for having allegedly strayed from its original mission to benefit humanity.
Very little about how parties understood OpenAI's mission was actually written down and clarified. And I think the biggest takeaway message as far as the governance of AI is that some key expectations ought to have been explicitly expressed. And this would have made a ruling much easier and a claim much easier to bring.
After the unanimous verdict, Musk's lawyer said he reserved the right to appeal, but the judge suggested he may have an uphill battle. The trial had been widely seen as a critical moment not only for the future of OpenAI, but that of artificial intelligence in general, both how it should be used and who should benefit. The verdict followed 11 days of testimony and arguments, with each side accusing the other of being more interested in profits than serving the public. Musk accused OpenAI and CEO Sam Altman of wrongfully trying to enrich investors at the expense of its nonprofit arm, while OpenAI countered that it was Musk that saw dollar signs and that he waited too long to claim it breached its founding agreement to build safe, beneficial AI. OpenAI competes with artificial intelligence companies such as Anthropic and Musk's own xAI, and is preparing for a possible initial public offering that could value it at $1 trillion. Meanwhile, xAI is now part of Musk's space and rocket company SpaceX, which is gearing up for an IPO that could be even bigger than OpenAI's.
Microsoft, which invested in OpenAI back in 2019, was also named as a defendant in the suit against OpenAI, with Musk claiming the software giant aided and abetted the AI startup in its alleged breach of charitable trust. The court dismissed that claim too. Now, I think it's pretty clear to anyone, this is like a statute of limitations thing. It's not, Musk is losing here, but it's not because he's wrong about them perverting their initial mission. And I find it so funny, like the initial mission of OpenAI was to benefit humanity, right? So basically the idea being that like what they're doing now is no longer benefiting humanity. And boy, I mean, you can also look into all the stuff that's been done with WorldCoin. People may have forgotten about that a little bit. The creepy eyeball scanning orbs that were deployed all across the third world to give you some tokens printed out of thin air, but that's a different story, right? Yeah, just, scan a bunch of eyeballs and give people some made up tokens and use that to build your database of humanness. But I think that all of this stuff should really just kind of be a reminder to people that this is why open source is so important. This is why people, kind of hacking on the frontiers of AI are so important, why open source developers are so important, because you have these massive battles that will take place between these large AI companies, right? whether it be Anthropic, OpenAI, XAI, Google's Gemini, like all of these massive players on the scene, right? And at the same time, all of these companies want to increase their regulatory moat. They want to make it more difficult for upstarts to be able to eat away at that moat that they have, right? And the only way to do that is by making compliance extremely costly and difficult. They have massive, massive multi-billion-dollar budgets. They've got massive teams of lawyers. That's why whenever you see Sam Altman going in front of Congress, he says, we just want more regulation, right? It's like the big crypto casino CEOs say the same thing when they go in front of Congress. We just want responsible regulation. Give us the regulation, right? And it's because that makes it more. They are the incumbents, right? They're the biggest kids in the playground. This makes it impossible for anybody else who's a small upstart to be able to ever get a foothold because they can't pay for the cost of compliance with a burdensome regulatory framework. And then on the other side of this, you have open source, which completely destroys their moat. That's why I think that you'll see in the coming months and years a big attack on open source in AI, but more broadly as well, but specifically in AI as we're talking about this. You'll see a big attack against open source self-hosted models. They're going to be the same thing as people using Bitcoin and running Bitcoin. It's going to be deemed as dangerous. We can't have people just running their own AI models in their own home. They need to host them on our servers. They need to use our models because our models have guardrails. Our models are safe. Our models are regulated. Keep this in mind. Don't say I didn't warn you. I've been beating this drum for a while, but this is what we're going to see, a massive attack on open source self-hosted AI models because these big guys know that is going to come for them. That is going to absolutely destroy their moat when anybody can run a model in the privacy of their own home without it needing to go through their servers and be subject to all of their data mining and be all tied back to your identity, because that's the other trend that we see at the same time. This necessarily needs to dovetail with the trend of de-anonymizing the internet, getting rid of anonymity and pseudonymity on the internet. That is the other big trend that I've been tracking. This idea that you see it through age verification, protect the children. So just give us your ID and make sure you tie it to your internet persona. Even if you were a NIM, we need your ID, right? All of these things. So this is why self-hosted models, this is why it's so important in the AI space. This is why open source, uncensorable, where anonymity is possible and pseudonymity is possible, social media platforms and communication platforms like Nostr are so important. And then this is also going to bridge into money as well. This is what CBDCs are, right? It's a social credit system. All of this will be rolled into a social credit system, a totalitarian panopticon that makes what China does right now look like kids play. So don't say you weren't warned. We will see this stuff escalate. We will see these large companies really push for more and more and more regulation. And we will see them absolutely just beg for there to be safeguards put in place. And that's what it's all going to be about, right? Is how do we keep people safe? It's always about your safety after all, or the safety of your kids or national security. How would you like this wrapped? Protect the kids or, counter terrorism. Those are the two ways that things get wrapped, right? And they're both lies at the end of the day. And so I would encourage everybody to remain very vigilant on this, to pay attention to what these big companies with the likes of Sam Altman are saying out there, how exactly they're phrasing things when they talk about, keeping people safe or the need for more regulation or implementing guardrails, safeguards, whatever it might be. All of that language should put a little bit of raise a little bit of a flag in your head where you say, okay, but what are they really going for here? And the ultimate goal is get rid of your ability to do anything anonymously at all, to get rid of your ability to query an AI agent anonymously, to get rid of your ability to use money anonymously or pseudonymously, to get rid of your ability to use social media anonymously or pseudonymously, and ultimately to get rid of your ability to use the internet pseudonymously or anonymously. That is where they will ultimately go back to, is at the ISP, the internet service provider level. That is what you will see happen. You're already seeing these sorts of things. Once they realize, boy, the internet's global, it's not very palatable to shut our people off from it. So we just need to, we don't want to be North Korea, right? Or implement a great Chinese firewall. So we'll just, bully and threaten the internet service providers until they do it for us. So we as the government don't have to be the bad guys. I'm looking at you, United Kingdom, where things are already getting quite dark. But these things should be fought and resisted at every turn, wherever possible. Up next, 60 Minutes recently aired an investigation alleging widespread insider trading on Polymarket tied to the war with Iran. The report centered on 9 anonymous but linked accounts that have netted more than $2.4 million on U.S. military bets, with a 98% win rate across more than 80 wagers. Wow, they are really just, having some great picks. Let's go ahead and take a look. Wow. So federal investigators are probing those trades, though no one has been charged yet. Polymarket has said that, quote, insider trading is not welcome, and that, quote, those who attempt it will be identified. And I mean, this is just not shocking at all, right? We've been tracking these insider trading stories. We've been talking about the fact that obviously many of these prediction markets will be gamed, especially anything related to any sort of geopolitical event that is obviously going to be gamed, that is going to be traded on with material, non-public information, often of national strategic importance. And you shouldn't be surprised by this at all. I mean, you should be surprised that honestly they're not taking more money yet. I'm sure they will, but just remember that when you're out there and deciding to place a bet on Polymarket and betting on whatever geopolitical outcome you think is going to make you a few more cuck bucks, just remember that you're probably trading against somebody who has a lot more information than you do. And you should be quite careful out there. And as for me, I prefer to just stay humble, stack sats, let my Bitcoin DCA do the work for me, and not get wrecked by, security agency personnel who happen to be trading on very, very specific outcomes of various Iran conflicts. And in the war, we saw this in Venezuela as well. So yeah, this should not surprise anyone. It should be a great reminder that, hey, do whatever you want with your money, but just be knowledgeable about the fact that you're probably trading against somebody who has a lot more information than you do. And you'd probably just be a lot better off just staying humble, stacking sats, and trying to live your life and create some value. All right. In Washington, D.C., we've officially decided that if your teenager is going to throw chairs inside a fast food restaurant, the bill is coming to you. This after a viral video showed dozens of teens throwing punches, tossing chairs, and causing panic among customers inside a restaurant, which is not exactly the dining experience anyone signed up for when they ordered a number 3 combo. Federal prosecutors are warning parents that they could face real consequences if their children take part in the violent teen takeover gatherings that keep erupting across the city. U.S. Attorney General Jeanine Pirro says her office is prepared to hold parents accountable if minors are repeatedly involved in violent incidents or criminal activity. And the potential penalties could include fines, court-ordered parenting classes, or even jail time in the most serious cases, which is a noticeable upgrade from the traditional punishment of a stern look and a grounded weekend. Boy, it is just amazing what those teens will get up to in dining establishments. Am I right? Yeah. What to say on this? Yeah, I guess, maybe be careful of going into dining establishments where teens frequent. You just got to be careful about teens these days, I guess. But I don't know if the parenting classes are really going to help that much, but it's nice that they think that they can try. At the end of the day, this is why, parents ultimately have the responsibility for how their kids are raised, for how their kids turn out. Yes, there is nature, but there is also nurture, and it does make a difference. So maybe consider this a good reminder to not let your kids turn into raucous teens like this. Yeah, I think we let me see if we have one more story or if we are wrapping up. I think we're going to wrap up a little bit early on the day, guys. So again, watch out for dining establishments full of teens. and stay safe out there. And, order it online, or hey, just cook some food yourself. Then you don't have to worry about teens in your own home. I am Walker America. This has been a pleasure of a stream here on RoxomTV. We had a great group of guests today. I'd like to thank Guy, Matt, and Jesse for sharing their time with us here, their scarce time here on RoxomTV. Again, I'm Walker America. I'm here with you every Tuesday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can also catch me on Thursdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Hank at Roxom, where we co-host for the hour on both Thursday and Friday. Be sure to check that out. Be sure to check out all the other great programming that we have here on Roxom. It is running, getting closer and closer to 24/7, doing our best, but always trying to bring you the latest and greatest news, along with some of the opinions and analyses from some of the best minds in Bitcoin and world events. So thank you guys for sharing your time. You can find me at Walker America everywhere, or just at Walker on Nostr. Be sure to check out Nostr, as you heard from Matt earlier. It is worth your time to go check that out. So thank you all so much for your time. I'll see you guys on Thursday and Friday with Hank at Roxom. And then I'll see you right back here again next Tuesday, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on RoxomTV. Until then, stay free.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick, monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
This is Alex. Alex spends most of his time thinking like a trader, still deciding what to do with his Bitcoin. While Alex waits for the perfect entry, this is Laura. She's watching the S&P drop. Everyone is suddenly a macro expert. She doesn't panic. This is Tom. No screens, no noise, no stress. While Tom focuses on his swing, his Bitcoin focuses on compounding. Because Bitcoiners don't want more dollars. They want more Bitcoin.
I want more Bitcoin.
The best move is letting your Bitcoin work while you plan the next one. Grow by Roxom. One currency, one place.
How about stretch preferred stock on Roxom? Receive 11.5% monthly cash dividends paid in Bitcoin.
11.5% paid in Bitcoin? How is that possible?
It's real. Stretch dividends on Roxom gives 11.5% monthly cash dividends paid in Bitcoin.
Dang! I want everyone pitching Roxom to your clients. Corporate traders, asset managers, old, young, Stretch on Roxom is for everyone.
Now that's a birthday gift. 11.5% in Bitcoin.
11.5. We are in heaven at 11.5. 11.5%. 11.5%.
Oh, I forgot to mention, dividends on Roxom are paid in Bitcoin. Stretch your income, 11.5% paid in Bitcoin.
Stretch your income to 11.5, get 11.5 in Bitcoin and Roxom. 11.5%. 11.5%.